Welcome, dear listener. I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. Before we begin our story, I invite you to settle into your most comfortable position. Perhaps you're nestled under soft blankets, or maybe you're resting against plump pillows that support you just right. Wherever you are, whatever position feels best, know that this time is yours, a gentle refuge from the day that's past. Let's take a moment together to release whatever you've been carrying. We'll do this slowly, peacefully, with just a few mindful breaths. There's no rush, no urgency. Simply follow along at your own pace. Begin by breathing in slowly through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Feel the cool air entering, filling your lungs completely. Hold that breath gently. 1, 2. And now, release it slowly through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let it go, and with it, any tension you've been holding. Beautiful. Now, as you continue breathing naturally, scan your body for any remaining tension. Soften your shoulders, letting them drop away from your ears. Relax your jaw, allowing your teeth to part slightly. Uncurl your fingers. Release any tightness in your forehead, around your eyes. Let yourself sink a little deeper into comfort. Tonight, we're going on a journey together, one of mystery and discovery, but gentle and soothing. You're safe, you're comfortable, and you're exactly where you need to be. Tonight, we find ourselves in the heart of a small university town, where autumn has painted the streets in shades of amber and gold. Here, tucked between a second-hand bookshop and an art supply store, sits the Hourglass Coffee Shop, a warm refuge that has served the same community for nearly 40 years. Our story follows Margot, the shop's owner and keeper of countless customer stories. She knows the regulars by their orders and their quirks. Professor Ainsworth with his crossword puzzles and black coffee. Young Emma, who studies art history over endless cappuccinos. And Thomas, the mysterious gentleman who arrived every Tuesday and Thursday at precisely 3 o'clock for the past 5 years, always ordering the same thing, a pour-over coffee and a slice of lemon cake. But Thomas hasn't come to the Hourglass for 3 weeks now. In his usual spot by the window, Margot found something he left behind. A leather-bound journal filled with cryptic entries, sketches of symbols, and what appears to be an incomplete map of the town. The journal speaks of hidden histories, forgotten corners of the university, and a mystery that spans decades. With the journal as her guide, Margot begins to follow the trail Thomas left behind through quiet archives, forgotten campus buildings, and the stories of those who remember when. There are puzzles to decipher written in the margins, clues hidden in coffee-stained pages, and a revelation about the hourglass itself that will gently illuminate the present with light from the past. So settle deeper into your pillow. Let your breathing remain soft and easy, and prepare yourself for a journey through cobblestone streets and candlelit rooms, where every discovery brings us closer to understanding, and where the greatest mysteries are solved not with urgency, but with patience, care, and attention to detail. Transition to story. Let us begin on a Tuesday afternoon in October, when the light slants golden through tall windows, and the first drops of autumn rain begin to tap against glass. The rain started just after 2:30, as Margot Chen wiped down the espresso machine for the second time that afternoon. She had learned to read the weather through the windows of the Hourglass Coffee Shop the way some people read books, in the gathering weight of clouds, in the way the light changed from gold to pewter, in the sudden flight of birds from the copper beech tree across the street. The Hourglass occupied the ground floor of a brick building that dated back to 1889, when the university was still young, and the town consisted mainly of farms and a single dirt road. The coffee shop's interior reflected layers of time. Original tin ceiling tiles pressed with acanthus leaves, exposed brick walls where old advertisements for tonics and tobacco had been carefully preserved under shellac, and wide plank floors that creaked in familiar patterns beneath the feet of regulars who had walked the same paths to the counter for years. Margot had owned the Hourglass for 12 years, though she had been working there since college, first as a barista, then as manager, and finally as owner when old Mr. Peterson decided to retire to Vermont. She was 41 now, with reading glasses perpetually perched on her head, and fingers permanently stained with the ghost of espresso grounds beneath her nails. She knew every quirk of the vintage La Marzocco machine, every cold spot in the display case, every loose floorboard that announced a customer's approach. More than that, she knew the rhythms of her regulars, lives in the way that only a long-time observer could. She knew that Professor Ainsworth would arrive at 8 in the morning, with Tuesday's crosswords still damp from the newsstand, that Emma Chen, no relation, though they shared a laugh about it, would claim the corner table at 10 with her art history textbooks and laptop, that Mrs. Davenport would come at 11:30 for her almond milk cortado, and 20 minutes of knitting beside the fireplace. And she knew that Thomas Rothwell would arrive at 3 o'clock every Tuesday and Thursday, always alone, always with a worn leather messenger bag, always ordering a pour-over coffee made with the Ethiopian beans, and a slice of the lemon cake that Margot baked fresh each morning. Except Thomas hadn't come for 3 weeks now. The first Tuesday he missed, Margot assumed he was ill or traveling. The second Tuesday, she felt a flutter of concern, but reasoned that life interrupted routines, family emergencies, work obligations, any number of ordinary explanations. But now it was the third Tuesday, and the chair by the window where Thomas always sat remained conspicuously empty, and Margot found herself glancing at it throughout the afternoon with growing unease. Thomas had been a fixture at the Hourglass for 5 years. Margot knew surprisingly little about him, despite their twice-weekly interactions. He was intensely private in the way some people are polite, but reserving the essential details of himself. She knew he was somewhere in his 60s. With silver hair he kept trimmed short and steel-rimmed glasses that that gave him a scholarly air. He wore tweeds and corduroys, button-down shirts in muted colors, and good leather shoes that had been resoled multiple times. He always brought work with him, papers to grade or journals to read, she assumed, though she'd never asked directly. Their conversations consisted mainly of pleasantries about the weather, remarks about the day's cake selection, and occasional observations about the books she kept on the shelf behind the counter. He had once complimented her copy of The Name of the Rose, and they'd had a brief, warm exchange about Umberto Eco's attention to medieval detail. That was the extent of their relationship, and yet his absence felt significant, a missing note in the daily symphony of the hourglass. At 3:15, Margot carried a cloth to wipe down his usual table by the window. The table was a small round one with a marble top, positioned to catch the afternoon light and offer a view of the street and the university campus beyond. As she swept the cloth across the marble, her hand brushed against something wedged between the table and the window frame. She bent down and discovered a leather-bound journal, slim and dark brown, approximately 6 by 8 inches. It had clearly been tucked deliberately into the narrow space, not simply forgotten. Margot glanced around the coffee shop, only 3 other customers at the moment, all absorbed in their own activities, and carefully extracted the journal. The leather was soft with age and use, the corners slightly worn. There was no name embossed on the cover, no label or identification. Margot opened it to the first page with the careful reverence of someone who had loved books all her life. The handwriting inside was immediately familiar, the same neat, precise script she'd seen on the crossword puzzles Thomas occasionally left on the table. The same hand that had once written "excellent cake." As always, on a napkin he'd left with his payment and tip. The first entry was dated 5 years ago, almost to the day, October 12th. I have found it at last. After all these years of searching, the proof was here all along, hidden in plain sight. The hourglass. Of course it would be the hourglass. Everything circles back, like sand in glass, measuring time that has already passed and time yet to come. I must proceed carefully. The patterns must be documented, the connections verified. This will take time, but time is what I have, what we've all had, though some spent it more wisely than others. Today I ordered coffee and cake. The owner seems kind. She has watchful eyes, the eyes of someone who notices details. I must be careful, but also, perhaps, she is meant to be part of this. The patterns suggest as much. Margot read the entry twice, her heartbeat quickening slightly. The words suggested mystery, purpose, some kind of research or investigation centered around, or at least involving, her coffee shop. She turned the page. The next several pages contained sketches. The first was an architectural drawing of the hourglass's facade, rendered in careful detail with annotations marking the windows, the door, the transom, the cornerstones. Measurements were noted in the margins. The second sketch showed the interior layout, with the counter, tables, the back hallway, the storage room, and the stairs leading to the building's upper floors, all marked and labeled. But it was the third sketch that made Margot's breath catch. It was a map of the downtown area surrounding the Hourglass, but not the downtown as it existed now. This was an older version, she could tell from the building labels. Where the art supply store now stood, the map showed Whitaker's books. Where the parking lot stretched behind the coffee shop, the map indicated a garden and something labeled Rose House. The map was dotted with symbols, small hourglasses drawn at various locations throughout the downtown area. There was one at the Hourglass's location, naturally, but also at the university library, at what was now the town hall, at several locations on the campus itself, and at 3 or 4 other spots around town. Beneath the map, Thomas had written, the hourglass as symbol, as marker, as sign. 7 locations, 7 keepers. The pattern persists across generations, though the specifics shift. The original 7. 1. The coffee house, now Hourglass Coffee Shop. 2. The Rose House, destroyed 1962, parking lot. 3. Whitaker's books, now Artistic Endeavors. 4. The University Chapel, restored 1978. 5. The Old North Hall, University Administration. 6. The Town Hall, rebuilt 1945. 7. The Keeper's Garden, location uncertain. Question: were they all part of the same society? The same purpose? The architectural details suggest yes. The hourglass motifs appear in cornerstones, lintels, weather vanes. Hiding in plain sight, as the best secrets do, Margot looked up from the journal, her mind racing. She had owned the Hourglass for 12 years and worked there for nearly 20. She had never noticed an hourglass motif in the architecture. She'd assumed the name came from Mr. Peterson's fancy, or perhaps from some previous owner's whim. She glanced at the antique clock on the wall, 3:40. The afternoon rush wouldn't begin until at least 4:30, when students finished their late classes. She had time. Margot walked to the front door and stepped outside, standing on the sidewalk to examine her own building's facade with fresh eyes. The brick was dark red, nearly brown with age and weathering. The windows were tall and arched at the top, original to the building. The door was newer, replaced in the 1990s according to the records she'd inherited. But the transom above it was original, an arched window with decorative glasswork. She tilted her head, studying the transom more carefully. The glass was divided into geometric sections with leading, creating a pattern she'd seen 1,000 times, but never truly looked at. And there, in the center, she saw it. The leading formed the unmistakable shape of an hourglass, with 2 triangles meeting at their points. "Oh my God," she whispered. How had she never noticed? But of course she hadn't. It was simply part of the familiar landscape of her daily life, as invisible as the pattern of her own breathing. She looked at the cornerstones next, where the brick facade met the building's foundation. The stones were granite, weathered smooth, but still clearly carved. She crouched down to examine the one nearest the door. What she had always taken for decorative flourishes, abstract Victorian ornamentation, now resolved into a clear pattern. Hourglasses carved into the stone, intertwined with ivy and roses. A shiver ran through her that had nothing to do with the October chill. Thomas had been right. The building itself held secrets, signs of some purpose or identity that predated its current incarnation as a coffee shop. The rain was falling more steadily now. Margot stepped back inside, shaking droplets from her hair, and returned to the counter with the journal. She felt electrified, awake in a way she hadn't felt in years. Here was a mystery, a puzzle, something that reached back through time and connected the place she thought she knew so well to a hidden history. She made herself a cup of tea, jasmine pearl, for focus and calm, and settled onto the stool behind the counter. The afternoon light was fading to a deeper gray. She switched on the lamp at her station, creating a pool of warm light, and opened the journal to continue reading. The entries that followed were dated sporadically over the 5 years, not daily journals, but rather records of discoveries and thoughts. Thomas wrote about researching property records at the town hall, about conversations with elderly residents who remembered the town as it was in the 1940s and 50s, about hours spent in the university archives, examining old photographs and documents. One entry from 3 years ago caught her attention. March 3rd. Spoke with Margaret Ainsworth, Professor Ainsworth's mother, age 89, at the Evergreen Senior Center. She remembers Rose's house before it was demolished. She was a girl then, barely 12, but she recalls it as a beautiful Victorian mansion with elaborate gardens. She says it was owned by the Whittaker family, note the spelling, different from the bookshop, and that they hosted gatherings there. Literary salons, she called them. Poets, writers, professors would gather on Thursday evenings. Her father, a professor of classics, attended regularly. More importantly, she remembers an hourglass carved above the fireplace in the main parlor, and she remembers her father calling the gatherings the hours. She thought it was because they met for several hours, but now I wonder, was it a reference to the hourglass? Was the hours the name of the society itself? Mrs. Ainsworth also mentioned that her father had a ring he always wore, silver with an hourglass insignia. She still has it. She has promised to show it to me next week. Margot made a mental note. Professor Ainsworth, who came every morning for coffee and crosswords, might be a connection. His mother had information. Did the professor himself know anything about this history? She continued reading, watching as Thomas's research deepened. He had found references to the hours in old university records, mentions of a faculty society dedicated to the preservation of knowledge and the marking of time's passage. He had discovered that the 7 locations on his map all dated to the same period, 1885 to 1892, and all bore the hourglass symbol in some form. He had interviewed longtime residents, photographed architectural details, and traced ownership records. The picture that emerged was of a deliberate network, a society of scholars, writers, and keepers of knowledge who had embedded their symbols throughout the young university town, creating a kind of constellation of learning and memory. But what was the purpose? And what had happened to the society? The entries suggested it had faded sometime in the 1960s as members aged and died, as buildings were demolished or repurposed, as the town grew and changed, and the original mission became obscured. Then, about a year ago, the tone of the entries shifted. Thomas wrote, September 8th, I have found something that changes everything. In the university's restricted archives, in a collection of papers donated by the Whittaker estate, I have found the charter, the actual founding document of the Hours, signed by all 7 original members in 1889. The society's purpose was more specific than I thought. They were not merely dedicated to learning in the abstract. They were guardians of what they called the 7 treasures, 7 items or collections of significant historical or cultural value that they had committed to protecting and preserving. The charter lists the treasures only by code name. 1. The Chronicle. 2. The Correspondence. 3. The Map of Stars. 4. The Garden's Memory. 5. The Lost Voice. 6. The Timekeeper. 7. The Foundation. Each treasure was assigned to one of the 7 locations to be guarded by successive keepers. The charter established a system of inheritance. Each keeper would pass their responsibility to a chosen successor, along with instructions for the treasure's location and care. But here is the crucial question. Where are these treasures now? Were they lost when buildings were demolished, dispersed when the society faded? Or are they still hidden, waiting in the locations marked by hourglasses, protected by layers of time and forgetting? I have spent 30 years of my life as a historian, studying the past, teaching others to value what has been lost. This may be the greatest discovery of my career, a hidden archive right here, scattered across a small town, waiting to be uncovered. I must find the treasures. I must complete what the Hours began. Margot sat back, her tea forgotten and cooling in its cup. 7 treasures, hidden across 7 locations. The Hourglass Coffee Shop was one of those locations, which meant that somewhere in this building, or associated with it, there might be one of these treasures, historical items that had been deliberately preserved and hidden more than a century ago. She felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This was the kind of mystery she'd read about in novels, the kind of quest that protagonists embarked upon in stories. But this was real, documented in Thomas's careful handwriting, grounded in historical research and architectural evidence. But where was Thomas? Why had he stopped coming? And why had he left the journal here, hidden but findable? She turned to the most recent entries, looking for answers. last several pages were dated within the past 2 months. Thomas had been following a specific lead, trying to locate one of the treasures. He wrote, August 15th, I believe I have identified the location of the Chronicle. Based on the charter and subsequent documents I've found, the Chronicle was assigned to the coffee house, what is now the Hourglass. It appears to be a journal or set of journals documenting the history of the town and the university in the years 1889 to 1920. The final keeper at this location was a woman named Catherine Monroe, who ran the coffee house from 1910 until her death in 1945. Records show she had no children, no obvious heir. The building passed through several owners after her death, eventually becoming what it is today. But keepers of the hours were meant to pass their charges to chosen successors. Catherine Monroe must have hidden the Chronicle somewhere in the building, with instructions for its discovery by whoever was meant to find it. The pattern of the hours suggests that the building itself holds clues that the architecture, the space, speaks to those who know how to listen. I have examined every public space in the Hourglass, but I cannot access the private areas, the storage room, the apartment above, the basement. I need to find a way, or I need to trust someone with the truth. Margot's pulse quickened. She had access to all of those spaces. The storage room was where she kept supplies. The apartment above had been rented to various tenants over the years and was currently vacant between leases. And the basement, well, the basement was just a basement, full of old equipment and furniture, a space she visited perhaps twice a year. Could there really be a hidden journal down there, or tucked away somewhere she walked past every day? The second to last entry was dated 3 weeks ago, the last Tuesday that Thomas had come to the coffee shop, October 10th. I have made a decision. I will leave the journal where she can find it. Margot Chen, the current owner. I have observed her for 5 years now, and she has the qualities of a keeper: attention to detail, respect for history, a deep connection to this place. The patterns suggest she is meant to find the Chronicle. Perhaps that is why I was led here, why my research brought me to the Hourglass specifically. I am not well. The doctors have given me difficult news. I do not have much time, and I have not yet found the Chronicle's hiding place. But I can pass the search to someone else, someone who belongs to this place in a way I never could. If you are reading this, Margot, and I believe you will be, because the patterns rarely lie, then the task is now yours. Find the Chronicle, protect it, and perhaps in doing so, you will discover something about the Hourglass, about yourself, that has been waiting to be known. The clues are in the building. Look for the hourglasses. Count the roses. Remember that time is measured in both directions, what has passed and what is yet to come. Look for the hourglasses. Count the roses. I will not be able to return, but I trust this mystery to you. Margot stared at the words until they blurred. Thomas was ill, seriously ill. That was why he'd stopped coming. And he had left this journal deliberately, trusting her with his life's work, with a mystery that spanned generations. The last entry was brief, dated 2 days after the previous one, written in a slightly shakier hand. October 12th. One final note. The answers are in the mortar and the margins, in the space between stones, in the hidden rooms behind walls. The hours understood that the best secrets are structural. They become part of the building itself, invisible until you know to look. Begin where the coffee was brewed. Begin at the hearth. Trust the hourglass. And that was where the journal ended. The remaining pages were blank. Margot closed the journal gently and sat in the golden lamplight, listening to the rain against the windows and the distant hiss of the espresso machine cooling. The afternoon had transformed around her. The familiar coffee shop now felt layered with possibility, with hidden depths. The walls held secrets. The floor beneath her feet might conceal more than old pipes and foundation stones. She looked around the hourglass with new eyes. Begin where the coffee was brewed, Thomas had written. Begin at the hearth. There was no hearth in the coffee shop, not in the traditional sense. But there had been once. Margot knew from the building's history that the original structure had included a large fireplace. It had been bricked over decades ago when heating systems modernized. The brick wall behind the counter, where she hung the menu board and shelves of cups, that was where the old fireplace had been. Count the roses, he'd written. Look for hourglasses. Margot stood and approached the brick wall. She had looked at this wall thousands of times, had hung and rehung the menu board, had arranged and rearranged the shelves. But she had never examined it, never really looked at the bricks themselves. She switched on the additional counter lights, brightening the work area. The bricks were old, irregular in size, dark red and brown. The mortar between them was cracked in places from age and settling. And there, once she knew to look, she saw them. Bricks stamped with small designs. Not many, just scattered throughout the wall at seemingly random intervals. She traced her fingers over the nearest one. The design was worn but discernible, an hourglass stamped into the brick before firing. She found another a few rows up, a rose, another hourglass, another rose, a pattern scattered across the wall. Her heart was hammering now with the thrill of discovery. Count the roses, he'd said. She began counting, moving systematically across the wall. There were 7 bricks stamped with roses, 7 bricks stamped with hourglasses, 7 treasures, 7 locations, 7 of each symbol. She stepped back and tried to see the pattern as a whole. The marked bricks didn't form an obvious picture or shape, but they weren't random either. There was something deliberate about their placement, something that nagged at her spatial sense. She grabbed a napkin and pen and quickly sketched the wall, marking the positions of each stamped brick. When she finished, she stared at the pattern. The bricks formed lines if you connected the hourglasses, you got one shape. If you connected the roses, you got another. And where the two patterns intersected, there, right at eye level, slightly left of center, a brick that appeared completely ordinary, unmarked, positioned where the hourglass pattern and the rose pattern crossed. Margot reached out and pressed the brick gently. Nothing happened. She tried pushing harder. Still nothing. She tried pushing from different angles, tried pulling, tried twisting. Wait, the clues are in the mortar. Thomas had written. In the space between stones. She examined the mortar around the brick. It looked the same as all the other mortar, old, cracked, dusty. But when she pressed her fingernail against it, she felt it give slightly. Not like aged mortar, which would crumble. This compressed like something softer, more pliable. With growing excitement, Margot retrieved a butter knife from the silverware bin. Carefully, gently, she inserted the tip into the mortar line around the brick and applied slight pressure. The mortar compressed and pulled away easily, not mortar at all, but some kind of putty or caulk, painted to match the real mortar. Within minutes, she had cleared the false mortar from around all four sides of the brick. Her hands were shaking. She set down the knife and carefully pulled at the brick. It slid out smoothly, revealing a hollow space behind it. Inside the hollow was a wooden box, approximately 8 inches square and 3 inches deep. The wood was dark with age, but the box was intact, sealed with a simple brass latch. Margot lifted it out carefully, reverently. It was lighter than she expected. She carried it to the counter and set it down under the lamp. For a moment, she simply looked at it. A secret hidden for decades, possibly more than a century. A treasure of the hours, waited for someone to find it. And now here it was, in her hands, because a kind man had spent 5 years in her coffee shop and trusted her with his life's work. She opened the latch. The hinges creaked softly. Inside, cushioned in faded velvet, was a journal bound in burgundy leather, larger than Thomas's journal, older and more worn. Beneath it were several folded papers and what looked like a small, tarnished brass key on a chain. Margot lifted out the journal. The leather was soft and supple despite its age, well cared for. On the first page, in an elegant, old-fashioned hand, were written the words, "The Chronicle of the Hours, being a true and faithful record of the Society, commenced this 15th day of September, 1889, by Catherine Monroe, keeper of the coffee house." Below that, in the same hand, "To whoever finds this, you are meant to be here. You are meant to know. Guard what you learn, honor what was preserved, and when the time comes, pass this charge to another worthy keeper. The hours may fade, but memory persists. Truth persists. And some things are worth protecting across generations. Welcome, keeper. Your journey begins." Margot realized she was crying quiet tears of wonder and connection, of stepping into a story she hadn't known she was part of. Outside, the rain fell steadily. Inside the hourglass, a secret had been revealed, and Margot Chen, coffee shop owner and accidental inheritor of a mystery, began to read. The evening crowd had come and gone, students grabbing quick coffees between dinner and evening study sessions, a few townspeople stopping in for decaf and conversation, the usual rhythm of a Tuesday night. Margot moved through the motions of serving them with the practiced ease of 12 years' experience. But her mind was on the journal hidden beneath the counter, wrapped carefully in a clean kitchen towel. She had read only the first few pages before customers began arriving, just enough to understand that the Chronicle was exactly what Thomas had suspected. A detailed record kept by the members of the Hours, documenting their activities, their purposes, and crucially, the treasures they protected. By 8 o'clock, the shop was empty again. Margot locked the door, flipped the sign to closed, and dimmed the overhead lights, leaving only the warm glow of the counter lamps and the sconces along the walls. She made herself a cup of chamomile tea, pulled a stool close to the counter, and opened the Chronicle once more. Catherine Monroe's handwriting was beautiful, clearly the product of an era when penmanship was an art. The letters were perfectly formed, the lines straight even without ruling, the whole effect one of elegant precision. But more than that, there was personality in the writing. Flourishes on capital letters, the occasional underline for emphasis, small sketches in the margins. The Chronicle began with an explanation. I undertake this record at the request of the founding members of the Hours, so that those who come after may understand our purpose and our methods. We are 7, 3 members of the university faculty, Professor Samuel Whittaker, Professor Helena Ashford, Professor James Hartford, 2 townspeople of literary inclination, Mr. David Rose and Mrs. Margaret Caldwell, 1 student of promise, Mr. Thomas Blackwood, graduate fellow in history, and myself, proprietor of the coffee house on Main Street. We have bound ourselves to a common purpose, the preservation of knowledge and memory against the tide of time and change. Each of us has been entrusted with an item or collection of items of significant value. Not monetary value necessarily, though some of our charges might command high prices. Rather, we preserve things of historical and cultural worth, things that might otherwise be lost or destroyed, scattered or forgotten. We call ourselves the Hours because time is what we measure ourselves against. We are stewards of the past, guardians of memory, keepers of what was. And we mark our presence with the symbol of the hourglass, time measured, time preserved, time flowing in both directions as sand falls from future into past. This chronicle will serve as a record of our society and its activities, to be kept in perpetuity at the coffee house, which we have designated as the central location of the Hours. It is here that keepers may gather, here that records may be consulted, here that the work continues. Margot paused in her reading, struck by the responsibility that had been placed on this building, on the space she now owned and operated. The coffee house had been the center of the hours, the heart of the society. That meant Catherine Monroe had been not just one member among 7, but the central keeper, the one who maintained the Chronicle itself. She continued reading. The next pages described the 7 treasures in detail. 1. The Chronicle kept at the coffee house by Catherine Monroe. This record itself, along with associated documents pertaining to the society, to be maintained and updated by successive keepers of the coffee house. 2. The correspondence kept at the Rose House by Samuel Whitaker, a collection of letters written by notable figures connected to the university's founding, including correspondence between the university's first president and various political and cultural figures of the 1870s and 1880s. The letters reveal the genuine intentions and ideals behind the university's establishment, as well as controversies that were later obscured from official histories. 3. The map of SDARS, kept at Whitaker's Books by Margaret Caldwell, an astronomical chart drawn by Maria Mitchell, the pioneering woman astronomer, during a visit to the university in 1876. The map is unique. It shows not only star positions, but also annotated observations and calculations in Mitchell's own hand. Mrs. Caldwell values it for its representation of women's contributions to science, contributions often minimized or erased. 4. The Garden's Memory, kept at the Keeper's Garden by David Rose, a complete botanical record of native plants in this region, compiled by Mr. Rose over 15 years. The collection includes pressed specimens, detailed drawings, and notes on traditional uses of each plant, as taught by the indigenous peoples who originally inhabited this area. Mr. Rose fears this knowledge will be lost as land is developed and oral traditions fade. 5. The Lost Voice, kept at the University Chapel by Helena Ashford, a collection of speeches, sermons, and writings by Reverend Marcus Freeman, an abolitionist minister who preached in this town from 1850 to 1865. Reverend Freeman was instrumental in the Underground Railroad activities in this region, and his writings provide first-hand accounts of that dangerous work. Professor Ashford believes these documents belong to a history that must not be forgotten. 6. The Timekeeper, kept at the Old North Hall by James Hartford, a comprehensive genealogical record of the founding families of both the town and the university, including families whose contributions have been overlooked or minimized in official records. Professor Hartford has spent 20 years compiling this resource, and he is determined that all the builders of this community be remembered, not just the wealthy and prominent. 7. The Foundation, kept at the Town Hall by Thomas Blackwood, a cache of original architectural drawings, correspondence, and photographs documenting the construction of the town's and university's earliest buildings. Mr. Blackwood sees these materials as a record of craft and labor, of the hands and minds that built the physical structures we now inhabit. He wishes to honor the workers, architects, and artisans whose names rarely appear in history books. Margot read through the descriptions twice, moved by the care and intention behind each collection. These were not random historical curiosities. Each represented someone's deliberate choice to preserve what they saw as valuable voices and contributions that might be overlooked by conventional history. The Chronicle continued with entries documenting the Society's meetings, which occurred monthly at the coffee house. Catherine Monroe described gatherings where members would report on their treasures, discuss preservation strategies, and occasionally present research or readings. The tone was warm, collegial. It was clear the members were friends as well as colleagues, bound by shared values. But as Margot read forward through the years, she began to notice changes. The entries became less frequent. Members aged, died, were replaced by new keepers, though finding suitable successors seemed increasingly difficult. The tone shifted from confident to concerned. An entry from 1918 caught her attention. December 3rd, 1918. We are now only 4. Professor Ashford passed last spring, and the chapel's new chaplain, though a decent man, has shown no interest in our work. The lost voice remains hidden in the chapel's bell tower, but I fear without a dedicated keeper, it may be discovered and removed, or worse, simply forgotten and left to decay. Mr. Rose has been ill and speaks of moving to California for his health. If he goes, who will care for the garden's memory? His nephew shows no interest in botanical studies. Professor Hartford is 79 and nearly blind. He can no longer update the timekeeper, and his children are scattered across the country, uninterested in genealogical work. I am 58, still strong, but I wonder what will become of the hours when I am gone. How do we ensure these treasures survive when the world is changing so quickly? When young people care more for motor cars and moving pictures than for preservation of the past, Margot felt a pang of sympathy across the decades. Catherine Monroe had watched the society she valued begin to crumble, had witnessed the challenge of passing on a mission to a new generation that didn't share the same sense of urgency. The entries from the 1920s and 30s were sporadic, often months apart. Catherine wrote of her attempts to recruit new members, of her frustrations and small successes. A few entries mentioned treasures being moved or consolidated as locations closed or changed hands. The Rose House was sold in 1924, and the correspondence had been moved to storage at the University Library. Whitaker's books closed in 1933, and the map of stars came to the coffee house for safekeeping. By 1940, Catherine wrote, January 15th, 1940. I am now the only remaining original member. The Hours as a society has effectively ended. The monthly meetings stopped 5 years ago, but the treasures remain, and I remain their keeper. I have gathered what I could hear at the coffee house. 3 of the 7 are now in my care. The Chronicle, always here. The correspondence, retrieved from the University Library. in 1938. The map of stars, brought here when Whittaker's closed. The other 4 treasures, I believe, are still in their original locations, though without dedicated keepers. The garden's memory. I believe David Rose took it with him to California, but I have lost contact with his family. The lost voice, still in the chapel, I hope, though I have not checked in years. The timekeeper. Missing, Professor Hartford died in 1936, and I do not know what became of his records. The foundation, possibly still at Town Hall, which has been rebuilt since, or possibly lost. I will hide what I can protect. I will leave instructions for a future keeper, someone who may find these treasures and continue our work. The hours taught me that time moves in circles, that what is hidden can be revealed, that memory persists if we give it a vessel. I have made arrangements. When I am gone, the coffee house will pass to my niece's daughter, a thoughtful girl who loves this place. I will hide the treasures within these walls and leave her clues. Perhaps she will understand. Perhaps she will become the keeper I hope for. And if not her, then someone someday. The patterns persist. The hours will find their keeper. The final entry in Catherine Monroe's hand was dated February 2nd, 1945. I am dying. Dr. Patterson says it is my heart. It has been weak for years, and now it fails in earnest. I am 72 years old. I have had a good life and a purposeful one. The treasures are hidden. The chronicle and the related documents are behind the brick, at the crossing point of hourglasses and roses. The correspondence is in the foundation, beneath the hearthstone. To access it, one must remove the brick that conceals the chronicle, then reach behind and down, where a catch will release the stone. The map of stars is in the walls in the space between the inner and outer walls upstairs, accessible from the apartment's closet. Instructions are with each treasure. To whoever finds this, I have given you what I could protect. The other treasures may be lost, or they may still wait in hidden places for someone to discover them. That quest I must leave to you. Guard what you have found. Honor the memory. Continue the hours in whatever form makes sense for your time, and know that you were meant to find this. The patterns rarely lie. After that, the handwriting changed. A new entry, dated March 1945, was written in a different hand, younger, more modern. March 15th, 1945. My great-aunt Catherine passed 2 weeks ago. She left the coffee house to me, along with a letter telling me to look for the treasure behind the hearth. I thought she was being poetic, referring to the warmth and community of this place. I did not understand she meant it literally. I have read the chronicle. I am overwhelmed. I am 24 years old. I have just returned from working in a factory during the war, and I am supposed to be the keeper of historical treasures. I don't know if I'm equal to this task, but I will try. I will keep the coffee house running. I will protect what Aunt Catherine protected. And perhaps, in time, I will understand what she understood about the importance of memory and preservation. Alice Munro Hartwell. The entries that followed, spanning from 1945 to 1962, were Alice's records as keeper. She wrote less frequently than Catherine, and her entries were shorter, more businesslike. But it was clear she took her role seriously. She described maintaining the coffee house, dealing with post-war changes in the town, and gradually learning more about the treasures in her care. Then, in 1962, disaster struck. July 20th, 1962. The Rose House has been demolished. I learned of it today. They're building a parking lot where the beautiful Victorian mansion once stood. I feel sick with grief and guilt. I should have checked years ago whether the correspondence was still in the original location. Aunt Catherine wrote that she had moved it here to the coffee house, but I can't find it in the foundation beneath the hearthstone. I've searched everywhere. Either she never actually moved it, and it's been destroyed with the Rose House, or she hid it somewhere else, and I'm missing her clues. This is my failure as keeper. I have lost one of the 7 treasures. Margot felt Alice's distress across the decades. To be responsible for something precious, and to lose it, the weight of that must have been immense. Alice's entries after that were tinged with sadness and determination. She wrote about trying to locate the other treasures, about visiting the chapel and the town hall, about asking elderly townspeople if they remembered the hours or any of the original members. She had limited success. The lost voice might still be in the chapel, but she couldn't access the bell tower without drawing attention. The foundation was nowhere to be found at the rebuilt town hall. The timekeeper and the garden's memory were simply gone, lost to time and change. The final entry in Alice's hand was dated 1981, April 3rd, 1981. I am retiring. My daughter and son-in-law will take over the coffee house, but they see it only as a business, not as a trust. I have told them about the Chronicle, but they don't understand the importance. They smile and nod and treat me like a sentimental old woman. I'm leaving the Chronicle where Aunt Catherine left it, behind the brick. Perhaps the next true keeper will find it. Perhaps not. I have done what I could. The map of stars is still in the upstairs wall. I checked last week, still safe, still hidden. I hope someone finds these treasures someday and understands what they represent. I hope the hours, in some form, continue. Alice Munro Hartwell. After that, the Chronicle was blank. No more entries for 43 years, until today, when Margot had found it. She sat back, her tea long gone cold, her mind spinning with everything she'd learned. The hours had been real, had been important, had preserved genuine treasures of historical and cultural value. Most of those treasures were lost. Now decades of change and forgetting had scattered them, destroyed them, hidden them beyond finding. But 2 remained accessible. The Chronicle itself, which she now held, and the map of stars, apparently still hidden in the walls of the apartment upstairs. And somewhere, possibly, the correspondence might still exist, either in the foundation of the coffee house, where Catherine said she'd hidden it, or lost when the Rose house was destroyed. The other treasures, the lost voice, the garden's memory, the timekeeper, and the foundation were probably gone. But possibly, just possibly, they were still out there, hidden in places Alice couldn't access or didn't think to look. Margot glanced at the clock. 10:30. She should close up, go home, get some sleep. But she felt energized, awake with purpose in a way she rarely experienced. She had found something remarkable, had been entrusted with a genuine mystery and a genuine responsibility. Thomas had spent 5 years researching this. He had trusted her to continue the work. Very well, she would. She would find the map of stars in the upstairs apartment. She would search the foundation for the correspondence. And then, maybe, she would try to trace the other treasures. She would become what Catherine Monroe and Alice Hartwell had been, a keeper of the hours. But first, tomorrow, she needed to find Thomas. She needed to tell him that his work had not been in vain, that she had found the Chronicle and would honor it. She needed to thank him. Margot carefully wrapped the Chronicle in its towel and placed it in her bag, along with Thomas Rothwell's journal. She would take them home, read them more thoroughly, make plans. As she locked up the Hourglass and stepped out into the cool October night, the rain had stopped, and the stars were beginning to emerge between thinning clouds. She thought of the map of stars, hidden in the walls, waiting. She thought of Maria Mitchell, the pioneering astronomer, drawing her observations by hand. Some things were worth preserving. Some knowledge needed keepers. Margot walked home through quiet streets, feeling like she had discovered a calling she hadn't known she was searching for. Wednesday morning brought crystalline autumn light and a sense of purpose Margot hadn't felt in years. She opened the Hourglass at 6:30 as usual, started the espresso machine, slid trays of pastries into the warming oven, and brewed the first pots of coffee. But her mind was upstairs, in the vacant apartment, where a 145-year-old astronomical chart supposedly waited in the walls. The morning rush came and went. Professor Ainsworth with his crossword, Emma Chen with her textbooks, Mrs. Davenport with her knitting. Margot served them all with her usual warmth, while mentally cataloging what she'd need for the afternoon's exploration. Flashlight, measuring tape, utility knife, possibly a crowbar, definitely caution. At 9 o'clock, there was a break in customers. Margot pulled out her phone and searched for Thomas Rothwell, along with the town name. The first result made her breath catch, an obituary from 2 weeks ago. Thomas Edward Rothwell, 67, died peacefully at Evergreen Hospice on October 18th after a brief illness. Dr. Rothwell was a professor emeritus of history at the university, where he taught for 35 years. He was known for his meticulous research, his dedication to his students, and his passion for local history. He is survived by a sister in Portland, and numerous former students who consider themselves fortunate to have studied under him. A memorial gathering will be held at the University Library on November 2nd. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the Evergreen Hospice Foundation. Margot read it 3 times, tears blurring the words. Thomas had died. He had left the journal for her to find, knowing he would not return, trusting a relative stranger with the culmination of his life's work. And she hadn't known. She had wondered where he was, had even felt a small, petty annoyance at his absence before finding the journal and learning the truth. She felt the weight of his trust settle on her shoulders. He had chosen her. He believed she would find the Chronicle and continue what he had started. She could not let him down. A customer entered, and Margot hastily wiped her eyes and composed herself, switching back into professional mode. But throughout the rest of the morning, part of her mind was with Thomas Rothwell, with his years of patient research, with his final act of faith in her. By 11:30, the morning rush had ended. Margot's part-time assistant, Jamie, a university student who worked 3 mornings a week, was scheduled to come in at noon. That would give Margot the afternoon to explore the apartment. When Jamie arrived, a cheerful young person with purple hair and an encyclopedic knowledge of alternative milk options, Margot explained that she needed to do some work upstairs and would be unavailable unless there was an emergency. "Is this about the treasure hunt?" Jamie asked with a grin. Margot froze. "What?" "The thing with the brick. I saw you messing with the wall yesterday after closing. I came back because I forgot my phone charger." "Are you doing renovations?" "Because if you're uncovering the original fireplace, that would be so cool. Victorian fireplaces are gorgeous." Margot laughed, relieved. "Something like that. Investigating the building's history. Nice. Let me know if you find anything interesting." "I love old buildings." Margot filed that away. Jamie might actually be useful in this project. But for now, she wanted to explore on her own first, to see what was there before involving anyone else. She grabbed her supplies from the storage room, a toolkit, a strong flashlight, a step stool, and headed up the narrow staircase at the back of the building. The stairs were original, worn smooth in the centers from more than a century of footsteps. They creaked in familiar patterns that Margot knew by heart. The upstairs apartment consisted of 4 rooms, a main living space, a bedroom, a small bathroom, and a kitchen that was barely more than a galley. The apartment had been rented to graduate students mostly, people who valued location and affordable rent over space and luxury. The most recent tenant had moved out 6 weeks ago, and Margot hadn't yet advertised the vacancy. Now she was glad she hadn't. She needed time to search. According to Catherine Monroe's notes in the Chronicle, the map of stars was hidden in the space between the inner and outer walls, accessible from the bedroom closet. Margot went straight to the bedroom, a small square room with one window overlooking the street and a narrow closet with a sliding door. She opened the closet and examined it with the flashlight. It was about 3 feet deep and 4 feet wide, with a wooden rod for hanging clothes and a shelf above. The walls were plaster, painted over many times, currently a dingy cream color. Margot knocked on the back wall of the closet and listened to the sound. Hollow. That was promising. The building's outer wall was brick, and there should be a gap between the interior plaster and the exterior brick. A cavity where pipes and wiring ran, where insulation would be if the building had modern insulation, which it didn't. She ran her hands over the plaster, feeling for seams, irregularities, anything that might indicate a hidden panel. The plaster was smooth, unbroken. She tried the side walls. Nothing obvious. Then she looked up. The shelf above the rod was made of old wood, dusty and paint-stained. It appeared to be supported by brackets screwed into the walls. But when Margot looked more closely, she saw that the shelf sat slightly lower on the left side than the right, not much, maybe half an inch, but enough to be noticeable once you were looking for it. She removed the shelf. It lifted right up, not screwed down at all. Beneath it, the back wall of the closet had a section that looked slightly different from the rest. A rectangular area about 2 feet wide and 18 inches tall. The plaster here was smoother, never less painted over. Margot's pulse quickened. She pressed on the rectangle. It gave slightly. She pressed harder and felt something click. The panel swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing darkness beyond. She aimed the flashlight into the opening. The space between the walls was exactly as she'd imagined, a narrow cavity, perhaps 8 inches deep, running the length of the building. Old pipes ran vertically through the space, along with electrical wires added decades after the building's construction. Dust lay thick on the horizontal surfaces, and there, resting on a wooden slat about 2 feet to the left of the opening, was a large, flat package wrapped in oilcloth. Margot reached in carefully, mindful of spiders and mouse droppings, and whatever else might have accumulated in the wall cavity over the decades. The package was lighter than she expected, and the oilcloth crackled slightly as she lifted it. She backed out of the closet, cradling the package, and carried it to the bedroom window where the afternoon light was strongest. She set it on the floor and carefully unwrapped the oilcloth. Inside were 2 layers of waxed paper, and inside that, a wooden frame, and mounted in the frame, behind glass, was a large sheet of paper covered in precise drawings and notations. The map of stars. Margot sat back on her heels, hardly daring to breathe. The paper was yellowed, but intact. The ink faded to brown, but still legible. The map showed the night sky, not a modern star chart with photographic precision, but a hand-drawn illustration with artistic as well as scientific merit. Constellations were drawn in careful detail, with lines connecting the stars and labels in elegant script. Around the margins were mathematical calculations, notes about positions and movements, and longer observations about specific stars and phenomena. At the bottom of the map, in the same hand that had made the drawings, was written, "Observations made from the University Observatory, September 1824, 1876. Maria Mitchell, with gratitude to Professor Samuel Whittaker for the invitation and hospitality." Margot knew the name Maria Mitchell. Any woman interested in science and history knew it. Mitchell had been America's first professional woman astronomer, discovering a comet in 1847 and going on to teach at Vassar College, where she inspired generations of women to pursue scientific careers. She had traveled widely to share her knowledge and observations, and she had been here in this small town at this university in 1876. She had looked through telescopes and drawn this map and left it behind. And Margaret Caldwell, the original keeper at Whittaker's books, had recognized its value and preserved it as part of the hours. Margot lifted the frame carefully. The back was sealed with more waxed paper, but tucked under the seal was an envelope, also wrapped in oilcloth. She extracted it gently. Inside was a letter in Catherine Monroe's handwriting. "To the keeper who finds this, this is the map of stars, drawn by Maria Mitchell, astronomer and teacher, during her visit to our university in 1876. Mrs. Caldwell, the original keeper of this treasure, valued it because it represents the work of a woman in science, work that was often dismissed or credited to men in her era. Maria Mitchell fought her entire life to be taken seriously as a scientist. She fought for women's right to education, to professional recognition, to be seen as more than decorative or domestic creatures. This map is a piece of that fight. It is proof of her intellect, her precision, her contribution. In 1933, when Whittaker's books closed, I brought this map here for safekeeping. I hid it in the walls because I feared it might be stolen or sold if anyone knew of its existence. A map drawn by Maria Mitchell would be valuable to collectors, but I did not want it sold to a private owner who would lock it away. I wanted it preserved for a time when it might be shared, when its story could be told, when Maria Mitchell and all the women like her would be honored as they deserved. If you are reading this, perhaps that time has come. Guard this treasure, but also consider sharing it with museums, with scholars, with those who need to know that women have always been scientists, have always looked at the stars and understood them. The hours preserved this so it would not be lost. You are now its keeper. Make wise choices. Catherine Monroe, 1940. Margot read the letter twice, moved by Catherine's foresight and by the treasure's significance. This wasn't just a pretty historical object. It was a piece of feminist history, a record of a woman's intellectual work from an era when such work was often erased or ignored. She carefully rewrapped the map in its protective layers. and carried it downstairs to the coffee house. Jamie looked up from wiping tables. "Find anything good?" "You have no idea," Margot said, unable to keep the smile from her face. She secured the map in the safe in the storage room, the small fireproof box where she kept the cash deposits and important documents. Then she returned to the counter and pulled out her laptop. She needed to learn more about Maria Mitchell, about the university's history, about the context of this treasure. Over the next hour, between serving occasional customers, Margot dove into research. She learned that Maria Mitchell had indeed toured various colleges and observatories in the 1870s, sharing her knowledge and advocating for women's education in science. Several institutions had records of her visits, but most of the documentation focused on the major universities. A small liberal arts college in what was then the middle of nowhere might not have seemed significant enough to record in detail, but the map proved she'd been here. Her own hand had drawn these stars, had made these calculations. It was direct, primary source evidence of her presence and work. Margot also learned that Mitchell's papers and artifacts were held primarily at Vassar College, where she had taught, and at the Maria Mitchell Association in Nantucket, her birthplace. The map would fit perfectly with those collections. It should be shared, studied, celebrated, but it should also be documented first, understood in context, its story told properly. Margot thought about Thomas Rothwell's research, about the Chronicles records, about the full story of the Hours and their preservation efforts. This wasn't just about the map. It was about the whole network of treasures, the society that protected them, the keepers who passed them down. An idea began forming. What if she could locate the other treasures? What if she could piece together the full story and present it as a complete collection, the Hours and their treasures, revealed after decades of obscurity? It was ambitious. It might be impossible. But Margot felt the pull of it, the same pull Thomas must have felt when he started his research. She pulled out Thomas's journal and the Chronicle, setting them side by side on the counter, and began making notes. What did she have? What was missing? And where might she look? Found the Chronicle coffee house. Found the map of stars, coffee house, originally Whitaker's books. Found, possibly accessible, the correspondence, coffee house foundation, or lost with Rose House, the lost voice, University Chapel, possibly still in Bell Tower, the foundation, town hall, location unknown, probably lost, the garden's memory, taken to California, trace lost, the timekeeper, missing since 1936, location unknown. She would start with the foundation beneath the coffee house. Catherine had written specific instructions. Remove the brick that concealed the Chronicle, reach behind and down, find a catch to release the hearthstone. If the correspondence was there, she could find it. Margot glanced at the clock, 2:30. Jamie's shift ended at 4. She could wait until closing, Or she could ask Jamie to stay longer so she could search this afternoon. The anticipation was making her restless. She compromised. She would wait until the afternoon slowed, probably around 3:30, then start the search. If Jamie needed to leave, she'd continue after closing. To distract herself, she updated the Chronicle with the first new entry in 43 years. October 25th. I am Margot Chen, current owner of the Hourglass Coffee Shop, formerly the Coffee House. 3 days ago, I found Thomas Rothwell's journal and began to learn about the hours. Yesterday, I found the Chronicle hidden behind the brick wall, exactly where Catherine Monroe left it in 1945. Today, I found the map of stars in the upstairs apartment, preserved and intact. I am beginning to understand what it means to be a keeper. Thomas Rothwell died 2 weeks ago, but his research has given me a map to follow, a purpose I didn't know I was searching for. I will continue what he started. I will find the other treasures if they still exist, and I will honor the memory of the hours by sharing what they preserved. This is my commitment: to guard what was entrusted to this place, to seek what was scattered, and to ensure that the work of preservation continues. The hours may have faded as a society, but their purpose persists. Memory persists, and I am grateful to be part of that persistence. Margot Chen, keeper. She closed the Chronicle, feeling the rightness of her words, the solemnity of the commitment she'd made. Then she looked at the brick wall behind the counter, at the ordinary-looking brick that concealed the hollow space, and prepared herself to search deeper into the building's foundations. At 3:45, with only one customer in the shop, a regular who was absorbed in her laptop and wouldn't notice anything unusual, Margot retrieved the butter knife and began removing the brick from the wall again. It came out more easily this time, the false mortar already loosened from yesterday's removal. She set the brick aside and aimed her flashlight into the hollow space where the Chronicle had been hidden. The cavity was deeper than she'd realized, extending back about 18 inches into the wall. She could see the back of the exterior brick, dusty and cobwebbed. And below the hollow, where the Chronicles box had rested, the cavity continued downward into darkness. Margot knelt on the floor and reached into the opening, extending her arm as far as she could. Her fingers found the back wall of the cavity, then traced downward. About 2 feet down, her fingers encountered something different from brick, wood, smooth and planed. She stretched further, groping in the dark, until she found what felt like a metal latch. She tried to push it. Nothing happened. Tried pulling. Still nothing. Then tried sliding it sideways and felt it move with a soft click. From somewhere beneath the floor, she heard a sound, a scrape of stone on stone, muffled but distinct. Margot withdrew her arm and stood up, looking around. The customer was still focused on her screen, earbuds in, oblivious. The sound had been quiet enough not to carry, but something had definitely moved. She walked around the counter, examining the floor. The coffee house had the original wide plank flooring throughout, except behind the counter, where the floor had been replaced with tile at some point, presumably when the kitchen area was modernized. But the tiles ended about a foot from the brick wall, and there, the original wood flooring resumed. Margot knelt and examined the planks near the wall. They looked like all the other planks, old, dark, worn smooth by generations of feet. But when she pressed on one, she felt it give slightly. And when she looked more closely at the seams, she could see that a section of planking approximately 2 feet square was actually a single unit, cut to look like multiple planks. Her heart racing, Margot fetched a flathead screwdriver from her toolkit. She inserted it into the seam and gently pried. The section of flooring lifted, revealing a shallow cavity beneath, perhaps 6 inches deep, lined with brick. And resting in the cavity was a metal box about the size of a shoebox, made of what looked like tin or steel, sealed with a heavy padlock that had long since rusted. Margot lifted the box out carefully. It was heavy, the metal was substantial, and whatever was inside had weight. The box was remarkably well preserved, considering it had been hidden beneath the floor for at least 80 years. The seal had protected it from moisture and pests. She carried the box to the counter and examined the lock. It was rusted solid. There was no way she was opening it without cutting through either the lock or the box itself. She'd need proper tools. But wait, Catherine's notes had mentioned a brass key on a chain, included with the Chronicle. Margot retrieved the Chronicles box from her bag where she'd stored it and found the key. It was tarnished with age, but intact, about 2 inches long. The head shaped like she smiled, an hourglass. She inserted the key into the padlock and turned. For a moment, nothing happened, the rust holding everything frozen. Then, with a grinding sensation that she felt through her hand, the lock mechanism shifted. She applied more pressure, turning steadily, and suddenly the lock popped open with a satisfying click. Margot released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. She removed the lock and carefully opened the metal box. Inside, wrapped in layers of waxed canvas, were bundles of letters, dozens of them, tied with ribbon that had once been blue but had faded to gray. The envelopes were of various sizes and qualities, ranging from fine linen paper to rougher stuff, all addressed in different hands to different recipients. The postmarks ranged from the 1870s to the 1880s. Beneath the letters was a leather document case, flat and rigid, approximately 10 by 14 inches. Margot opened it and found more letters, these ones unfolded and pressed flat, along with what appeared to be the drafts of speeches or articles, handwritten on foolscap. At the bottom of the box was a note in Catherine Monroe's handwriting, the correspondence, as gathered by Professor Samuel Whittaker. These letters document the founding of the university, revealing the ideals and controversies that shaped its early years. Professor Whitaker believed that understanding the genuine intentions of founders, with all their flaws and conflicts, was essential to understanding any institution. I brought these here from the Rose House in 1938, when Professor Whitaker's grandson was preparing to sell the property. I promised to keep them safe. Now, I pass that promise to you. Handle with care. These are fragile, and they are irreplaceable. CM 1940. Margot carefully lifted out the first bundle of letters and untied the ribbon. The top letter was addressed to Dr. Jonathan Hargrove, President, University, with no return address, postmarked 1877. The paper was brittle yellowed, but the ink was still legible. She unfolded it with extreme care and began to read. My dear Dr. Hargrove, I write with some urgency regarding the proposal to accept endowment from the Kensington estate. While I understand the financial pressures facing the university, and while I do not question Mr. Kensington's generosity, I must raise concerns about the conditions he has attached to his gift. That the university should restrict admission to persons of good character and appropriate background is a phrasing that troubles me deeply. I have spoken with Mr. Kensington directly, and he has made clear that his definition of appropriate background excludes persons of African descent, persons of Catholic faith, and women seeking instruction in any field beyond the domestic arts. This is unacceptable. We founded this university on principles of liberal education and broad access to learning. To accept conditions that explicitly restrict admission based on race, religion, or sex is to betray those principles. I urge you to refuse the Kensington endowment, or at the very least, to negotiate terms that do not compromise our integrity. Your colleague in this venture, Professor Samuel Whitaker. Margot read the letter twice, struck by its clarity and moral urgency. This was the kind of document that official histories often omitted: the conflicts, the principled stands, the moments when choices were made that shaped an institution's character. She carefully refolded the letter and examined others in the bundle. There were similar letters between various founders, faculty members, and administrators, discussing everything from curriculum design to building plans to philosophical questions about the university's mission. Some were routine, but many touched on significant issues. Debates about admitting women, about hearing faculty regardless of religious affiliation, about whether to accept funding from sources with questionable ethics. This was exactly what Professor Whitaker had valued: a record of the real conversations, the real struggles that shaped the university. Not a sanitized official history, but the complex, messy truth. Margot looked up and realized the customer had left at some point without her noticing. She was alone in the shop. She glanced at the clock. 4:30. Jamie had left at 4. She should lock up, close properly, but she was too absorbed in the discovery. She locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed, then returned to the counter and continued examining the letters. She didn't read them all, there were too many, and they required careful handling, but she sampled enough to understand their scope and significance. This was a treasure, absolutely. These letters belonged in the university archives, where scholars could access them, where they could contribute to a fuller understanding of the institution's history. But Margot also understood why Professor Whittaker had felt the need to protect them. Some of the letters were critical of decisions the university had made, of compromises accepted, of principles bent. Not every institution welcomed that kind of scrutiny. As evening deepened into night, Margot carefully repacked the correspondence in its metal box and placed it in the safe with the map of stars. She would need to think about next steps, how to preserve these materials properly, how to share them responsibly, who to contact at the university. But for now, she felt the deep satisfaction of having found 2 of the 7 treasures intact. The Chronicle, the map of stars, and the correspondence, 3 out of 7. And she'd found them all in a single day of searching. The other 4 treasures would be more difficult. They were in locations she didn't own, locations that might have changed dramatically in the past century. The lost voice in the chapel, the foundation at Town Hall, the timekeeper, and the garden's memory simply lost. But she would try. Thomas Rothwell had spent years on this research. The least she could do was spend weeks or months. Margot made herself a simple dinner from the shop's provisions, a grilled cheese sandwich, and tomato soup, comfort food that she ate at the counter while reviewing Thomas's notes. He had been thorough, meticulous, mapping out the locations of all 7 original sites, noting architectural changes, conducting interviews with longtime residents. One entry in his journal particularly caught her attention. April 15th. Spoke with Father Murphy at the university chapel. Asked carefully, obliquely, about the bell tower and whether anyone had accessed it recently. He said the tower has been closed to the public for safety reasons since the 1980s. The stairs are unstable. The platform is rotting. Only maintenance workers go up there, and only when absolutely necessary. He mentioned that when he first arrived at the chapel 5 years ago, he'd climbed the tower out of curiosity and found all sorts of old junk stored up there, broken furniture, boxes of ancient hymnals, discarded equipment. He'd meant to have it cleared out, but never got around to it. Old junk could include a hidden collection of abolitionist writings. The lost voice might still be there, waiting in the bell tower, overlooked and forgotten. Question: how do I access the bell tower without raising suspicion? Father Murphy seems like a decent man, but I don't know him well enough to trust him with the full truth. Margot tapped her fingers on the counter, thinking. The chapel was a 10-minute walk from the Hourglass. Father Murphy still served there. She'd seen him around town. A friendly man in his 60s, with white hair and a ready smile. Could she approach him, invent some excuse to access the bell tower? Or perhaps there was someone else who could help. Someone who knew the chapel better, who might have access without raising questions. Professor Ainsworth. He came to the Hourglass every morning, had for years. His mother had been part of Thomas's research, had provided information about the hours. And Professor Ainsworth himself taught in the history department. He might appreciate the significance of what she was trying to do. Margot made a decision. Tomorrow morning, she would talk to Professor Ainsworth. She would show him the Chronicle, explain about the treasures, and ask for his help. It felt right to involve others at this point. Catherine Monroe and Alice Hartwell had both struggled with the burden of being soul keepers. Perhaps the modern version of the hours should be collaborative, a group of people working together to locate and preserve the treasures. With that thought warming her, Margot closed up the Hourglass properly, secured the treasures in the safe, and walked home through the quiet streets, already planning tomorrow's conversation. Professor Richard Ainsworth arrived at the Hourglass at 8 o'clock Thursday morning, as he had every weekday morning for the past 15 years. He was a tall, thin man in his mid-60s, with steel gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He carried a worn leather satchel and the morning newspaper, and he nodded pleasantly to Margot as he approached the counter. "Good morning, Margot. Black coffee, please, and one of those blueberry scones if they're fresh." "They are," Margot assured him, preparing his order with the efficiency of long practice. But her hands trembled slightly, and she had to steady herself before speaking. "Professor Ainsworth, could I ask you something? It's about local history, and I think you might be the perfect person to help me." He looked up with interest, his habitual reserve softening into genuine curiosity. "Of course, I'd be happy to help if I can." Margot glanced around the shop. 2 other customers, both absorbed in their own thoughts, neither close enough to overhear. She lowered her voice anyway. "It's complicated, and it's going to sound strange. Could you possibly stay for a bit after you finish your coffee? I have something to show you, something I found in the building." Ainsworth's eyebrows rose. "You've piqued my curiosity. Yes, I have office hours at 10, but I'm free until then." "Thank you," Margot said, relief washing through her. "I'll be right back." She served the other customers, then hung a small "back in 10 minutes" sign on the counter, something she rarely did. But Jamie would arrive at 9 to cover. She gestured for Professor Ainsworth to follow her to the corner table, the one with the best natural light and relative privacy. From her bag, she carefully withdrew the Chronicle, still wrapped in its protective cloth. She set it on the table between them and unwrapped it slowly. "Professor, have you ever heard of a society called the Hours?" Ainsworth froze, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. He set it down carefully, his gaze fixed on the leather-bound journal. "Where did you find that?" His reaction told Margot everything she needed to know. He recognized it, or at least recognized what it represented. Hidden in the brick wall behind the counter, she said, there's a hollow space marked by bricks stamped with hourglasses and roses. The Chronicle was inside, along with other materials. I found it 2 days ago. After finding this, she withdrew Thomas Rothwell's journal from her bag, which had been left for me by Thomas Rothwell. At the mention of Thomas's name, Ainsworth's expression shifted to sadness. Thomas, you knew him only as a customer. He came here twice a week for 5 years. We never really talked, not beyond pleasantries. But he left his research journal for me to find, and it led me to the Chronicle. I read his obituary yesterday. I'm sorry for your loss. Were you friends? Colleagues primarily, but yes, friends. He was a remarkable historian. Ainsworth reached out and gently touched the Chronicle's cover. May I? Please. He opened it with the reverence of someone who understood exactly what he was holding, and began reading Catherine Monroe's opening entries. Margot watched his face as he read, seeing recognition, wonder, and something that might have been relief. After several minutes, he looked up. My mother told me about the hours, he said quietly. I always thought, I hoped, it was more than family legend, but I had no proof. She died 10 years ago, and her stories died with her. Or so I thought. Your mother was Margaret Ainsworth, Margot said. Thomas interviewed her. It's mentioned in the Chronicle. She would have loved knowing that someone was researching this, that someone cared. Ainsworth turned pages carefully, scanning entries. She grew up hearing about the hours from her father, my grandfather. He was Professor James Hartford, one of the original 7 members. The keeper of the timekeeper. Margot's breath caught. You're descended from one of the founders. I am, and I grew up hearing fragments of the story. The Society of 7 Keepers, the treasures they protected, the hourglass symbol. But my grandfather died before I was born, and my mother only knew what she remembered from childhood, which wasn't much. She couldn't remember what her father's treasure was, or where it might be now. She just remembered the ring he wore, the one with the hourglass insignia. Thomas mentioned that ring in his journal. Did your mother still have it? Ainsworth smiled and held up his right hand. On his 4th finger was a silver ring with a simple but elegant hourglass design engraved on the face. She left it to me. I've worn it for 10 years, thinking of it as a connection to family history. I never dreamed I'd see actual proof that the society existed. He continued reading the Chronicle, his expression growing more intent. When he reached the sections about the treasures, he read even more slowly, absorbing every detail. Finally, he looked up. This is extraordinary, Margot. This is genuinely significant historical documentation. The hours, the treasures, the keepers. This is a story that needs to be told. And you found 2 of the treasures already. She nodded. The Chronicle itself, the map of stars, and the correspondence. All three were hidden here in the hourglass, but the others, she gestured to Thomas's journal, are scattered or lost. Thomas spent years trying to locate them. I want to continue his work. I'll help, Ainsworth said immediately. However I can. My grandfather's treasure, the timekeeper, it's been lost since he died in 1936. But the others might still be findable. The lost voice in the chapel, the foundation at Town Hall. Even the garden's memory might be traceable if we can find records of where David Rose went in California. The chapel is what I wanted to ask you about, Margot said. Thomas's notes suggest the lost voice might still be in the bell tower, hidden among old storage. But the tower is closed to the public. I don't know how to access it without raising questions. Ainsworth thought for a moment. Father Murphy is a reasonable man. He's also a bit of a history enthusiast. He's attended several of my public lectures on local history. If we approached him honestly, explained that we're researching a historical society that may have hidden documents in the chapel, he might allow us access. You think we should tell him the truth? A version of it, at least. We don't need to mention treasures or anything that sounds like something from an adventure novel. We frame it as historical research, which it is. Ainsworth smiled. Academics get access to all sorts of places when we claim research purposes. Margot laughed, feeling the tension ease. When can we talk to him? My office hours end at noon. We could visit the chapel this afternoon, if you're free. Jamie can cover the shop. Yes, let's do it. They spent the next hour discussing the Chronicle, with Ainsworth reading through more entries and occasionally explaining context that Margot didn't have, information about the university's history, about the town's development, about the historical figures mentioned in Catherine Monroe's careful records. You know, he said at one point, my mother always said her father believed that history belonged to everyone, not just to the wealthy and powerful. He hated that so much historical research focused only on the elite, on presidents and industrialists, while ignoring ordinary people. That's what the timekeeper was, a genealogical record of everyone who built this community, regardless of their status. Do you think it still exists? Margot asked. Honestly, I doubt it. My mother went through all of my grandfather's papers after he died, and there was nothing like what you've described. Either he hid it somewhere we never found, or it was lost. But he hesitated. There might be a copy, or at least partial records. My grandfather was meticulous. He might have deposited copies of his research somewhere for safekeeping, separate from the original timekeeper. Where would he have done that? The university archives, possibly. Or the town historical society, if it existed back then. I can check the university records. I have access to the restricted collections as faculty. It's worth exploring. They made plans to meet at 1 o'clock at the chapel. Ainsworth gathered his things, and as he was leaving, he turned back. Margot, thank you for trusting me with this. My mother would have been overjoyed to know the Hours wasn't just a family story. I'm honored to help continue the work." After he left, Margot felt energized. She had an ally, someone with expertise and connections who could help navigate the research. And more than that, someone who understood the emotional weight of this work, the sense of connection to the past. Jamie arrived at 9, and Margot briefed her on the afternoon plan, that she'd be out for a few hours on personal business, that Jamie would handle the shop alone. Jamie, as always, was cheerfully competent and asked no questions beyond, "Should I call you if we run out of oat milk?" At 12:30, Margot closed the Chronicle and Thomas's journal and secured them in the safe. She made herself a quick lunch, freshened up, and at 1 o'clock sharp, she walked the 10 minutes to the university chapel. The chapel was a beautiful stone building, Gothic Revival style, built in 1892, according to the date carved above the door. It had a steep slate roof, stained glass windows, and a square bell tower rising from the front entrance. The hourglass symbol was carved into the keystone above the main doors. Margot noticed it immediately now that she knew to look. Professor Ainsworth was waiting on the steps, and together they entered the chapel. The interior was cool and dim, lit by jeweled light from the stained glass. Wooden pews lined the nave, and at the far end, an altar stood before a large window depicting the resurrection. Father Murphy emerged from a side door, smiling in greeting. He was exactly as Margot remembered, white-haired, rosy-cheeked, with the comfortable manner of someone who genuinely enjoyed people. "Professor Ainsworth, good to see you. And this must be your colleague, Margot Chen," Margot said, shaking his hand. "I own the Hourglass Coffee Shop downtown." "Ah, I know it well. Excellent coffee. How can I help you both today?" Ainsworth launched into the explanation they'd rehearsed. "Father Murphy, we're conducting research into a historical society that was active in this town in the late 1800s. The society was called the Hours, and they were dedicated to preserving historical documents and artifacts. We have reason to believe they may have hidden some materials in the chapel's bell tower, possibly in the 1860s or 1870s, long before the current building existed." Father Murphy's eyebrows rose. "In the bell tower? Well, it's certainly full of old things. I've been meaning to have it cleared out for years." He chuckled. "To be honest, I'm a bit embarrassed I've let it go so long. What sort of materials are you looking for? Possibly letters, speeches, or documents related to abolitionist activities in this area before and during the Civil War," Margot said. "We have historical records suggesting such materials were hidden here for safekeeping." "Abolitionist materials." Father Murphy's expression grew serious. "That would be significant indeed. This region was very active in the Underground Railroad, you know. Many escaped slaves passed through here on their way to Canada. If there are documents about that history," he trailed off, then nodded decisively. "You must certainly search the tower. I'll take you up myself." "Is it safe?" Ainsworth asked. "I'd heard the stairs were unstable." They're old and creaky, but they're stable enough if you're careful. Just watch your step and hold the railing. Shall we go now? He led them to a narrow door at the base of the tower and produced a ring of keys. The door opened with a protest of hinges, revealing a spiral staircase that wound upward into dimness. Father Murphy switched on a flashlight and began climbing. Margot and Ainsworth followed, their footsteps echoing on the old wooden stairs. The staircase was indeed precarious. The steps were worn, the railing wobbled slightly, and everything smelled of dust and time. They climbed past 2 landings where ropes hung in darkness, the bell ropes, Margot realized, leading up to the bells in the belfry. Finally, they emerged onto a platform just below the bells themselves. The space was larger than Margot expected, perhaps 15 feet square, with a low ceiling and windows on all 4 sides, offering views of the campus and town. And it was absolutely crammed with old furniture, boxes, and miscellaneous items. There were broken chairs stacked against one wall, boxes of hymnals moldering in corners, a disassembled lectern, several stained glass window panels that had apparently been removed during some renovation, coils of rope, and various unidentifiable equipment covered in dust and cobwebs. As you can see, Father Murphy said with a rueful laugh, I haven't been exaggerating about the clutter. I'll leave you to search. Just be careful and shout if you need anything. I'll be in my office. He descended the stairs, and Margot and Ainsworth were left alone in the bell tower with the accumulated detritus of decades. Well, Ainsworth said, pulling out a flashlight of his own, let's begin. They worked systematically, starting with the boxes closest to the stairs and working their way around the room. Most of the boxes contained exactly what they appeared to contain: old hymnals, yellowed church bulletins, broken candle holders, moth-eaten vestments. But in the 3rd box they opened, tucked beneath a layer of moth-eaten altar cloths, they found something different. A leather portfolio, approximately 12 by 18 inches, tied closed with a strap that had rotted and split. Margot carefully lifted it out and untied what remained of the strap. Inside were papers, many papers, some handwritten, some printed, all yellowed with age. The first document was a speech, handwritten in dark ink on foolscap. Brothers and sisters in Christ, I stand before you today to speak a truth that many would prefer remain unspoken. The institution of slavery is an abomination before God, a sin that stains our nation and our souls. We cannot claim to follow the teachings of Christ while we permit human beings to be bought and sold like cattle. The speech continued for several pages, passionate and eloquent, condemning slavery and calling for abolition. At the bottom was signed, Reverend Marcus Freeman, Easter Sunday, 1855. We found it, Margot whispered. Ainsworth was reading over her shoulder. The lost voice, he confirmed. This is it. They carefully examined the rest of the portfolio's contents. There were more speeches, sermons on similar themes, and several letters from Reverend Freeman to various recipients, describing his work helping escaped slaves reach safety. One letter included a crude map showing safe houses and routes through the region, direct evidence of underground railroad activity. There was also a journal, small and pocket-sized, in which Freeman had kept brief notes about his work. The entries were cryptic, using codes and initials rather than names, clearly written to protect those involved if the journal were discovered. But the overall picture was clear. Freeman had been deeply involved in resistance to slavery, at great personal risk. At the bottom of the portfolio was a note in a different hand, Professor Helena Ashford, according to the signature, The Lost Voice, writings of Reverend Marcus Freeman, abolitionist and friend of freedom. I have gathered these materials from Freeman's descendants and hidden them here, in the chapel he served, where they belong. May they speak to future generations of the courage it takes to stand against injustice. H. Ashford, 1891. She hid them here over 130 years ago, Ainsworth said, and they've been here ever since, waiting. They spent another hour searching the rest of the bell tower, but found nothing else related to the hours. Carefully, reverently, they packed the portfolio back together and carried it down the spiral stairs. Father Murphy was delighted when they showed him what they'd found. This is wonderful. These should be preserved, studied, shared. Will you be donating them to the university archives? That's our intention, Ainsworth confirmed. Along with other materials we've discovered, we're documenting everything carefully first to ensure the full context is preserved. Excellent, and please feel free to return if you need to search further. I'm happy to help. They thanked him and left the chapel, Margot cradling the portfolio like the treasure it was. Outside, in the golden afternoon light, she and Ainsworth looked at each other and smiled. 4 treasures, Margot said. 4 out of 7. And we're just getting started, Ainsworth replied. Over the next week, Margot and Professor Ainsworth formed an unlikely but effective partnership. They met each morning at the Hourglass, where Ainsworth would arrive with his crossword and coffee, and they would spend half an hour reviewing plans, sharing research findings, and coordinating next steps. Ainsworth had access to university resources that Margot lacked: the restricted archives, historical databases, faculty contacts in various departments. Margot had the treasures themselves, the Chronicle, and an increasing understanding of the physical spaces where the hours had operated. Together, they documented the 4 treasures they'd found: the Chronicle, the map of stars, the correspondence, and the lost voice. Ainsworth photographed each item carefully, noting condition, content, and context. They created a comprehensive report on the hours, drawing from Catherine Monroe's Chronicle, Thomas Rothwell's research, and their own discoveries. But 3 treasures remained elusive. The garden's memory had been taken to California, by David Rose in the 1920s. Ainsworth searched genealogical records and found that Rose had died in 1932 in San Diego, but tracing his belongings after that proved difficult. His only heir had been a nephew who'd sold Rose's house and possessions. The botanical collection could be anywhere sold at an estate sale, donated to a library, simply thrown away by someone who didn't understand its value. The timekeeper, Ainsworth's own grandfather's treasure, was simply gone. Ainsworth had searched his family's papers thoroughly and found nothing. He checked the university archives and the town historical society, but Professor Hartford had not deposited his genealogical records in any official repository. That left the foundation, the architectural drawings and documents related to the town's earliest buildings, originally kept by Thomas Blackwood at the town hall. The town hall has been rebuilt twice, Ainsworth explained one morning. Once in 1923 after a fire, and again in 1947 when they expanded it. Each time, materials would have been moved, possibly discarded, possibly stored in new locations. If the foundation survived, it could be anywhere in the building. Do we have access to search? Margot asked. Not easily. It's a working government building with offices, meeting rooms, archives. We can't just wander through looking in storage rooms. Ainsworth frowned, thinking. But I know someone who might help Margaret Saunders, the town clerk. She's been in that position for 20 years, and she's a local history enthusiast. If anyone knows what's stored in the town hall's old spaces, it's her. 2 days later, Margot and Ainsworth had an appointment with Margaret Saunders in her office at the town hall. The building was a handsome brick structure dating from the 1947 renovation, 3 stories tall, with white columns flanking the entrance. Margot noted that there were no obvious hourglass symbols on the exterior, not surprising, given how much later this building was than the original. Margaret Saunders was a brisk, efficient woman in her late 50s, with short gray hair and bright, intelligent eyes behind cat-eye glasses. She greeted them warmly and listened with growing interest as Ainsworth explained their research into the hours. I've never heard of this society, she said when he finished, but I'm not surprised. There were dozens of civic and cultural organizations in the town's early years, literary clubs, fraternal societies, women's groups. Many of them kept their activities fairly private. We're particularly interested in materials that might have been housed in the original town hall, Margot said. Specifically, architectural drawings and documents from the 1880s and 1890s. Saunders thought for a moment. We do have old blueprints and drawings in the archives. They're stored in the basement, in a climate-controlled vault. Most are from the 1920s onward, but there might be some older materials. The challenge is that much of it was never properly cataloged. When the building was renovated in 1947, they just boxed up everything from the old structure and stored it. No one's done a comprehensive inventory. Could we access those archives? Ainsworth asked. With proper authorization, yes. As a university faculty member conducting historical research, you'd qualify. I'd need to accompany you, of course, and we'd need to schedule a time when I'm available. She checked her calendar. I could give you 3 hours tomorrow afternoon, if that works. It did. They arranged to meet at 2 o'clock the following day, and Margot left feeling hopeful. If the foundation had survived the various town hall transitions, it would be in that basement vault. The next afternoon, Margot and Ainsworth met Margaret Saunders at the town hall's side entrance. She led them through a maze of corridors to a heavy metal door marked Archives, authorized personnel only, which she unlocked with a key from the impressive ring at her belt. Beyond the door, stairs descended into a well-lit basement. The air was cool and slightly dry, good conditions for paper preservation. At the bottom of the stairs, another locked door opened into a large room lined with metal shelving units holding archival boxes, rolled blueprints in tubes, and filing cabinets. This is everything that's been kept, but not actively used, Saunders explained. Building permits, old blueprints, property records from before we digitized, meeting minutes from past decades, photographs, maps, basically anything related to town business that someone thought might have historical value. It's organized by broad category, but within categories, it's chaotic. She led them to a section along the back wall. These are the oldest materials, mostly from the 1947 and 1923 moves. The boxes aren't well labeled. You'll just have to look through them. They began with Ainsworth and Margot each taking a box, while Saunders worked at a desk in the corner, giving them space, but remaining available as required. The first several boxes contained exactly what Saunders had described: old property deeds, tax records, meeting minutes, all interesting from a historical perspective, but not what they were seeking. Margot was on her 5th box when she found something different. The box was labeled only TH, 1890s MISC. Inside, beneath a layer of yellowed newspapers, were rolled architectural drawings bound with ribbon that had once been white, but was now brown with age. She carefully lifted out the first roll and untied the ribbon. The paper crackled slightly. As she unrolled it, it was large, perhaps 3 feet by 4 feet, and showed detailed architectural plans for a building labeled Town Hall, first floor plan, 1889. Her heart beat faster. She unrolled the next drawing: Town Hall, second floor plan, 1889. And the next: Town Hall, elevation drawings, 1889. "Professor," she called softly, "I think I've found something." Ainsworth came over immediately, and together they examined the drawings. They were beautiful, precise, detailed, rendered in India ink with fine lines and careful notations. The architect's name was noted in the corner: Samuel Morrison, architect. But what made them special, what marked them as part of the foundation, was the notation at the bottom of each drawing. Property of the Hours, 1889. They continued through the box. There were drawings for several buildings: the original town hall, the university's first library, the building that had housed Whitaker's books, and others. There were also photographs, old albumen prints showing buildings under construction, workers posing with tools, horses and wagons hauling materials. And there were letters, correspondence between architects and builders, between the town council and contractors, discussing specifications, costs, timelines, materials. The documents painted a detailed picture of how the town had been built, who had done the work, what challenges they'd faced. At the bottom of the box was a leather-bound ledger. Margot opened it carefully. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, lists of names, occupations, wages paid, hours worked. It was a labor record, documenting every person who had worked on the town's construction projects in the 1880s and 1890s. Beside each name were notes: arrived from Ireland 1882, stonemason, trained in Italy, former slave, freed 1865, widow, supporting 4 children. These weren't just names and numbers. These were stories, histories, recognition of the people whose hands had built the physical structures of the town. On the first page of the ledger was a note: the foundation, a record of those who built our community. Every building stands on the labor of many hands, most of whom are never named in official histories. This ledger is my attempt to name them, to honor them, to ensure they are remembered. Thomas Blackwood, 1891. Margot looked up at Ainsworth, her eyes stinging with tears. We found it, the foundation. Ainsworth was paging through the ledger, his expression odd. This is remarkable. This is exactly the kind of history that gets lost: the workers, the laborers, the craftspeople. Official histories talk about who commissioned buildings, who designed them, but rarely about who actually built them. This fills that gap. Saunders had come over to see what they'd found, and she was equally impressed. This should be properly archived and digitized, she said. These drawings alone are valuable, but that ledger, that's something special. Genealogists would love access to this kind of record. They carefully removed the foundation from the box and set it aside to be photographed and documented. Margot felt the familiar thrill of discovery, the sense of connection across time to the people who had created and preserved these materials. 5 treasures now, 5 out of 7. Over the next few days, they documented the foundation as thoroughly as they documented the others. Ainsworth photographed every page of the ledger, every drawing, every photograph. They created a detailed inventory and wrote up the historical context, and they began having conversations about what to do with the treasures. They couldn't keep them hidden indefinitely. These materials had scholarly, cultural, and educational value. They needed to be shared, preserved properly, made accessible to researchers and the public. But they also wanted to honor the spirit of the hours, to tell the complete story, to present the treasures as a collection with context, not as isolated curiosities. One morning, over coffee at the Hourglass, Ainsworth presented an idea. What if we mounted an exhibition? The university library has exhibition space. We could present all 5 treasures together, along with the Chronicle and Thomas's research. We could tell the whole story of the hours, who they were, what they preserved, why it mattered. Margot loved the idea immediately. A formal exhibition would give the treasures the recognition they deserve, and it would honor Thomas's work, Catherine Monroe's vision, all the keepers who came before. We'd need to work with conservators to ensure the materials are properly handled, Ainsworth said. And we'd want to create high-quality reproductions for display to minimize handling of the originals. But yes, I think it could be powerful. A story about preservation, about memory, about what communities choose to value and protect. They began planning. Ainsworth would approach the university library's director to propose the exhibition. They would work with the archives department to ensure proper conservation of the materials. They would write detailed labels and interpretive materials to provide context for viewers, and they would dedicate the exhibition to Thomas Rothwell, whose years of patient research had made the discoveries possible. But first, there was one more thing Margot wanted to try. 2 treasures remained unfound: the garden's memory and the timekeeper. She wasn't ready to give up on them, not yet. Professor Ainsworth had been searching for the timekeeper, his grandfather's genealogical records, for over a week, with no success. The university archives held nothing. The town historical society had no record of Professor Hartford ever donating materials. Family papers had been thoroughly searched years ago, but one evening, as Margot was closing up the Hourglass, an idea struck her. She pulled out the Chronicle and paged through it until she found Catherine Monroe's entries from the 1930s, when Professor Hartford had still been alive, but aging and ill. One entry, dated 1935, read, "Professor Hartford came to the coffee house today," which was unusual. He rarely ventures out anymore due to his failing health and eyesight. He brought with him several volumes of the Timekeeper, asking if I might store them here for safekeeping. He worries about what will become of his life's work when he dies, and his children have made clear they have no interest in maintaining his genealogical research. I agreed, of course. I have placed the volumes in the upstairs apartment, in the storage closet at the end of the hallway. They will be safe there, and perhaps someday someone will value them as they deserve to be valued. Margot stared at the entry. The upstairs apartment, the storage closet at the end of the hallway. She had searched the bedroom closet and found the map of stars. But there was another closet, a larger storage closet in the hallway, which she used for cleaning supplies, extra linens for the apartment, and miscellaneous items that didn't fit elsewhere. She rarely opened it, never looked past the first few feet of shelving. Her hands trembling with excitement, Margot grabbed her flashlight and headed upstairs. The hallway of the apartment was narrow, with doors opening to the bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen. At the far end, easy to overlook, was a plain door painted the same cream color as the walls. Margot opened it and switched on the overhead light. The closet was deeper than she'd remembered, perhaps 8 feet deep and 6 feet wide. Wire shelving units lined both sides, holding cleaning supplies, light bulbs, toilet paper, paint cans left by previous tenants, and stacks of folded linens. She aimed the flashlight toward the back of the closet, past the shelving. There, in the very back corner, were stacks of old boxes, dusty and undisturbed. She carefully made her way between the shelving units and crouched down to examine the boxes. They were sturdy wooden crates, the kind used for storage in the early 20th century. The wood was dark with age, and the lids were nailed down. But burned into the side of each crate was a symbol, an hourglass. Margot's breath caught. She began counting. 8 crates, all marked with the hourglass symbol, all stacked in the back corner of the storage closet, where they'd sat undisturbed for 90 years. She needed tools. She returned downstairs, grabbed a crowbar and hammer from her toolkit, and hurried back up. Carefully, she pried the lid off the first crate. Inside, wrapped in muslin cloth, were leather-bound volumes. She lifted one out and opened it gently. The pages were filled with handwritten genealogical charts, family trees showing births, deaths, marriages, connections across generations. Names were written in careful script, with dates and notes about occupations, places of origin, significant life events. This was the timekeeper. All of it preserved in 8 crates in the back of the storage closet. Margot sat back on her heels, laughing with relief and amazement. It had been here all along, in the building she'd owned for 12 years. Catherine Monroe had stored it safely, and then Alice Hartwell had never looked far enough back in the closet to find it. It had simply been forgotten, waiting for someone to remember it existed. She spent the next hour carefully examining the contents of the crates. There were at least 30 volumes, each covering different family lines and time periods. Professor Hartford had been extraordinarily thorough, documenting not just the prominent founding families, but also working-class families, immigrant families, families of formerly enslaved people who had settled in the region after the Civil War. It was exactly what the Chronicle had described, a comprehensive record designed to ensure that all the builders of the community were remembered, not just the wealthy and powerful. In the last crate, beneath the final volumes, Margot found a letter in Professor Hartford's shaky handwriting. To whoever finds this, these volumes represent 40 years of research, thousands of hours of work. I have documented the genealogy of every family I could trace in this town and the surrounding region, from the earliest settlers in the 1790s through the present day, 1935. I did this work because I believe that every person's life matters. Every person's story deserves to be remembered. History should not be only about kings and presidents and wealthy men. It should be about all of us, the farmers and servants, the shopkeepers and laborers, the people who lived and loved and raised children and built communities. These records are incomplete. I did not live long enough to document everyone, and some families left no traces I could find. But it is more complete than any official record, and I hope it will be valued. Guard these volumes. They represent lives, stories, connections across time. They are the timekeeper, and they matter. James Hartford, 1935. Margot carefully replaced the letter and closed the crate. 6 treasures. She had found 6 out of 7. Only the garden's memory remained missing. And that one might be truly lost, taken across the country, dispersed after David Rose's death, scattered beyond recovery. The next morning, she could barely wait for Professor Ainsworth to arrive. When he walked through the door at 8 o'clock, she practically pulled him to the corner table. "I found it," she said. "The timekeeper. All of it. 8 crates of genealogical records, hidden in the upstairs storage closet." Ainsworth went pale, then flushed, then looked like he might cry. "You found my grandfather's work. It still exists. It's all there. 30 volumes at least, 40 years of research. It's extraordinary." He set down his coffee with shaking hands. "Can I see it? Now." They went upstairs together, and Margot showed him the crates, the volumes, the letter. Ainsworth sat on the floor of the storage closet and paged through his grandfather's research with tears streaming down his face. "My mother talked about this," he said. She remembered him working on it constantly, interviewing people, visiting cemeteries to copy down dates from headstones, poring over old church registers. She said he believed that everyone deserved to be remembered, and we thought it was lost. We thought all that work had been for nothing. "It wasn't for nothing," Margot said gently. "It's here, and now we can share it." They spent hours that day going through the volumes, marveling at the detail and care Professor Hartford had put into his work. Each family tree was annotated with notes about occupations, migrations, significant events. Hartford had clearly talked to people, recorded their stories, tried to capture something beyond just names and dates. "This is going to be invaluable for genealogical research," Ainsworth said, "and for understanding the full social history of this region. This is my grandfather's legacy, and I'm so grateful it's been found." That evening, Margot updated the Chronicle with a new entry. November 2nd. 6 treasures have been found and documented. 1. The Chronicle, found October 24. 2. The Map of Stars, found October 25. 3. The Correspondence, found October 25. 4. The Lost Voice, found October 27. 5. The Foundation, found October 31. 6. The Timekeeper, found November 2. Only the garden's memory remains lost. Professor Ainsworth and I will continue searching, but we acknowledge it may be beyond recovery. The Hours has been silent for decades, but its work continues. We are preparing an exhibition to share these treasures with the community, to tell the story of preservation and memory, to honor all those who protected these materials across generations. Thomas Rothwell, who died without seeing the fruits of his research. You were right. The treasures were here, waiting. Thank you for trusting me to find them. Margot Chen, Keeper. Over the next week, Margot and Ainsworth finalized plans for the exhibition. The university library director had enthusiastically approved the proposal, and they had a date set. The exhibition would open on December 15th, 2 months away. That gave them time to work with conservators, create reproductions and interpretive materials, and design the exhibition space. They also made decisions about the permanent homes for the treasures. The map of stars would be offered to the Maria Mitchell Association, where it belonged with other Mitchell artifacts and papers. The correspondence and the lost voice would be donated to the university archives. The foundation would go to the Town Historical Society. The timekeeper would be jointly held by the university and the Historical Society, with digitized copies made freely available for genealogical research. The chronicle itself would remain at the Hourglass, where it had always been kept, but with a facsimile available for researchers. Everything was falling into place. But Margot couldn't shake the feeling that the story was incomplete. The garden's memory was still out there somewhere, or at least the question of it was. She didn't want to give up, not quite yet. One evening, she sat at the counter after closing and paged through Thomas Rothwell's journal again, reading his notes about the garden's memory. He had tried to trace David Rose's movements after Rose left town in the 1920s. Rose had gone to San Diego for his health. He'd been suffering from tuberculosis. He had died there in 1932, as Ainsworth had confirmed. Thomas had found Rose's obituary in a San Diego newspaper, which mentioned that Rose was survived by a nephew, Gerald Rose, and that a funeral was held at a local church. But the trail went cold after that. Margot pulled out her laptop and began searching. She tried various combinations of Gerald Rose, San Diego, 1932, but found nothing useful. She tried searching for David Rose's obituary directly to see if Thomas had missed any details. She found it in a digitized newspaper archive, a short death notice from the San Diego Union, July 1932. David Rose, 67, formerly of town name, died July 15th at Mercy Hospital after a long illness. Rose was a botanist and naturalist who spent many years documenting native plants of the Midwest and California regions. He is survived by his nephew, Gerald Rose of Lowe's Angels, and a sister, Mrs. Martha Brennan of San Diego. Funeral services will be held at St. James Episcopal Church. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the San Diego Natural History Museum, where Rose volunteered for many years. Margot read the obituary 3 times. The San Diego Natural History Museum, where Rose volunteered for many years. If Rose had been a volunteer at the Natural History Museum, and if he'd been documenting native plants for decades, might he have donated his botanical collection to the museum? It would be the logical place for such materials, a repository that would understand their value and preserve them properly. She searched for the San Diego Natural History Museum online and found their website. There was a research collection section, and within that, a botanical collections database. She searched for David Rose in the database. One result appeared: Rose Collection, 1891-930. Botanical specimens and field notes documenting native plants of the Midwest and California. Donated 1931 by David Rose. Margot stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She'd found it. The garden's memory was in San Diego, in the Natural History Museum's collections, properly preserved and available to researchers. The next morning, she could barely contain her excitement as she waited for Professor Ainsworth to arrive. When he walked in, she waved him over immediately. "I found the garden's memory. It's at the San Diego Natural History Museum. David Rose donated it to them in 1931, a year before he died." Ainsworth's eyes widened. All 7 treasures. All 7 treasures, Margot confirmed. They stood there grinning at each other like children on Christmas morning. Then Ainsworth laughed and pulled her into an impulsive hug. "We did it. We found them all." Margot contacted the San Diego Natural History Museum later that day and spoke with a curator in the botany department. She explained about the hours, about David Rose, about the significance of the collection as one of the 7 treasures. The curator was fascinated and agreed to send high-resolution photographs of selected materials from the Rose collection for inclusion in the exhibition. The curator also shared some information Margot hadn't known. Rose's botanical collection was significant not just as a historical record, but as a scientific resource. Many of the plants he documented in the 1890s were now rare or extinct in the wild. His pressed specimens and detailed notes provided baseline data that modern ecologists used to understand how plant communities had changed over the past century. Rose's notes also include extensive documentation of indigenous plant names and traditional uses, the curator explained. That kind of ethnobotanical information is incredibly valuable and often lost. Rose was ahead of his time in recognizing the importance of traditional knowledge, so the garden's memory was not just preserved, it was actively used, studied, valued for exactly the reasons David Rose had hoped it would be. Margot updated the Chronicle one final time before the exhibition. November 8th. All 7 treasures of the hours have been found. 1. The Chronicle Hourglass Coffee Shop, 2. The Map of Stars, Hourglass Coffee Shop, to be transferred to Maria Mitchell Association. 3. The Correspondence, Hourglass Coffee Shop, to be transferred to University Archives. 4. The Lost Voice, University Chapel, to be transferred to University Archives. 5. The Foundation Town Hall Archives, to be transferred to Town Historical Society. 6. The Timekeeper, Hourglass Coffee Shop, to be transferred jointly to University and Historical Society. 7. The Garden's Memory, San Diego Natural History Museum, where David Rose donated it in 1931. After more than 80 years of silence and obscurity, the work of the hours is being brought back to light. The society may have faded, but their vision, that some things are worth preserving, that memory matters, that ordinary voices deserve to be heard, remains vital and important. An exhibition will open December 15th to tell this story and share these treasures. Thomas Rothwell's research will be honored. Catherine Monroe's faith will be vindicated. And perhaps new keepers will be inspired to continue the work of preservation and remembrance. The hours taught us that time flows in both directions, that the past is never truly past, that what was hidden can be revealed, that patterns persist across generations. This chronicle began in 1889. It now continues into a new century, with new keepers and new purposes, but the same fundamental commitment: to remember, to preserve, to honor what matters. Margot Chen, Keeper. The weeks between discovering the last treasure and opening the exhibition passed in a blur of activity. Margot and Professor Ainsworth worked with conservators from the university to assess and stabilize the materials. High-resolution photographs were made of every document. Facsimiles were created for display, protecting the fragile originals from light and handling. Jamie, Margot's assistant at the Hourglass, turned out to be a talented graphic designer, and she volunteered to create interpretive panels and labels for the exhibition. Her work was beautiful, clean, readable design that complemented the historical materials without overwhelming them. Emma Chen, the art history student who spent her mornings studying at the Hourglass, volunteered to help with installation. Professor Ainsworth recruited several of his graduate students to conduct additional research, filling in background on the historical figures mentioned in the treasures. What had begun as Margot's private discovery became a community project. People heard about the exhibition and wanted to contribute, wanted to be part of reviving the story of the hours. Mrs. Davenport, the regular who came every morning with her knitting, turned out to be the great-granddaughter of Margaret Caldwell, the original keeper of the Map of Stars. She had family letters that mentioned Caldwell's involvement in the hours, and she donated copies to be included in the exhibition. Father Murphy at the University Chapel contributed photographs of Reverend Marcus Freeman and historical materials about the chapel's role in the Underground Railroad. current mayor of the town, learning about the foundation, wrote a proclamation recognizing the contributions of all the workers and craftspeople who built the early town. The exhibition space at the university library was a large, bright gallery on the second floor, with climate-controlled cases and professional lighting. Margot, Ainsworth, and their team of volunteers spent 3 days installing the exhibition, arranging materials, adjusting lights, writing and rewriting label text until every word felt right. The exhibition was organized chronologically and thematically. Visitors entered through an introduction to the hours, who they were when they operated, what they believed. The 7 founders were introduced with brief biographies and, where possible, photographs. Then each treasure was presented in its own section, with materials displayed alongside interpretive text explaining the treasure's significance, how it was originally preserved, where it was hidden, and how it was rediscovered. Thomas Rothwell's research was highlighted throughout, with excerpts from his journal showing the patient detective work that had mapped out the treasure's locations. The centerpiece of the exhibition was the Chronicle itself, displayed open to Catherine Monroe's first entry, with facsimile pages arranged around it so visitors could read more of the entries. Beside it was a timeline showing the succession of keepers at the coffee house, Catherine Monroe, Alice Hartwell, and finally Margot Chen, with the story of how the Chronicle had been found after 43 years of silence. The exhibition ended with a reflection on memory and preservation, asking visitors to consider what they would choose to preserve if they could, what voices from the present they would want future generations to hear. Opening night, December 15th, was bitterly cold, with snow beginning to fall as evening approached. But that didn't stop people from coming. The gallery was packed, university faculty and students, townspeople, local historians, journalists, descendants of the original Hours members, and dozens of curious visitors who'd heard about the discovery and wanted to see the treasures. Margot stood near the entrance, greeting people as they arrived, feeling overwhelmed by the turnout. She wore a simple black dress and the hourglass necklace she'd found with the Chronicle, Catherine Monroe's necklace. She'd come to think of it, though she had no proof. It felt right to wear it tonight. Professor Ainsworth gave a brief opening speech, explaining the historical context of the hours and thanking everyone who had contributed to the exhibition. Then he introduced Margot, who'd prepared a few remarks, but found herself speaking more from the heart than from notes. 3 months ago, she said, I thought I knew the Hourglass Coffee Shop inside and out. I'd owned it for 12 years, worked there for nearly 20. It was my livelihood, my second home, a place I thought held no surprises for me. And then, a regular customer, a man I barely knew beyond his coffee order, left me a journal, and everything changed. She told the story simply, finding Thomas's journal, discovering the Chronicle, following the clues, uncovering treasure after treasure. she talked about Catherine Monroe and Alice Hartwell, the previous keepers who had guarded the treasures across decades. She talked about Thomas Rothwell and his years of patient research. "What strikes me most about this story," she said, "is the faith that these people had faith that the future would care about the past, that someone would come along who would understand the value of what they'd preserved." Catherine Monroe hid the Chronicle in 1945 without knowing if anyone would ever find it. Thomas Rothwell left his journal for me without knowing if I would follow through. That kind of faith, that kind of commitment to something beyond yourself, that's what makes preservation possible across generations. She gestured to the exhibition around them. These 7 treasures tell us that history isn't just about presidents and wars and major events. It's about a woman astronomer drawing star charts, about workers building a town, about families putting down roots, about an abolitionist minister speaking truth to power. These stories matter. These voices matter. And the people who preserved them believed that we would think so too. So this exhibition is a thank you to the Hours, to the keepers, to Thomas, to everyone who ever decided that something was worth saving for the future. And it's an invitation. What will we choose to preserve? What voices will we make sure aren't forgotten? The work of the Hours doesn't end with this exhibition. It continues with each of us. Every time we decide that something matters enough to protect, to document, to pass on. The crowd applauded, and then people began moving through the exhibition, examining the treasures, reading the labels, taking photographs, having quiet conversations about what they were seeing. Margot watched them, feeling a deep satisfaction. The treasures were being shared, the story was being told, the work of the Hours was being honored. Professor Ainsworth appeared at her elbow, holding 2 cups of coffee from the Hourglass. He'd arranged for the coffee shop to cater the opening. And Jamie was managing a station in the corner, serving lattes and scones. "You did it," he said, handing her a cup. "Thomas would be so proud." "We did it," Margot corrected. "I couldn't have done this without your help." They stood together, watching visitors engage with the exhibition. An elderly woman stood in front of the timekeeper display, searching through the facsimile pages for her family name. A group of students clustered around the lost voice, reading Reverend Freeman's powerful words. A young girl stood transfixed in front of the map of stars, her head tilted back, as if she could see the actual night sky in the careful drawings. The exhibition ran for 3 months, and during that time, it became one of the most visited exhibitions the university library had ever hosted. School groups came on field trips. Genealogists came to research their families in the timekeeper. Botanists came to see images from the garden's memory. Historians came to study the correspondence and the foundation. Articles were written about the discovery in historical journals and local newspapers. A regional magazine did a feature story with beautiful photographs. There was even talk of a book, a comprehensive account of the Hours, the treasures, and the keepers. But more than the accolades or attention, what moved Margot was the personal responses. People wrote letters thanking her for bringing this history to light. Descendants of people mentioned in the treasures came to the Hourglass to share family stories. A woman whose great-great-grandfather had been documented in the Timekeeper brought in a photograph of him, tears in her eyes, saying she'd never known his name had been recorded anywhere. Through it all, the Hourglass continued its daily rhythms. Coffee was brewed, pastries were baked, regulars came and went. But now Margot saw the space differently. It wasn't just a coffee shop. It was a keeper of memory, a link in a chain of preservation that stretched back more than a century. She kept the chronicle at the Hourglass, adding to it occasionally when there was something worth recording updates on the treasures. Notes about conversations with descendants of the original Hours members. Thoughts about what it meant to be a keeper in the modern age. One entry, written in March, read, March 20th. Professor Ainsworth and I had a long conversation today about whether to try to revive the Hours as an active society. We decided against it. The original Hours served a specific purpose in a specific time. They were protecting materials that might otherwise have been lost in an era when preservation infrastructure was minimal. Today, we have archives, museums, digital repositories. We have professionals dedicated to preservation. We don't need a secret society to hide treasures in walls, but we do need people who care about what's preserved, who think critically about what voices are heard and what stories are told. We need people who ask, what's missing from this account? Who's not being heard? What's being forgotten? Maybe that's the legacy of the Hours, not the specific form of a secret society, but the underlying commitment to preservation, to memory, to ensuring that history is fuller and more honest than it might otherwise be. The Hours has ended, but the work continues. In May, Margot attended Thomas Rothwell's memorial service, which had been delayed to coincide with the end of the spring semester when his former students could attend. She brought the chronicle and his journal, displaying them at the reception so people could see the fruits of his research. She met his sister, who thanked her for completing his work. Thomas talked about the Hourglass in his final weeks, she said. He talked about you, though he didn't know you well. He said you had the eyes of a keeper, whatever that means. I think he'd be happy knowing you found everything. I'm grateful he trusted me, Margot replied. Summer came, and the exhibition closed, with the treasures distributed to their new permanent homes. The map of stars was formally presented to the Maria Mitchell Association, where it would be displayed alongside other Mitchell artifacts. The correspondence and the lost voice went to the university archives. The foundation went to the town historical society. The Timekeeper was split between the university and the historical society, with a fully digitized version made available online. The chronicle returned to the Hourglass, where it had always belonged. Life settled back into routine, but not quite the same routine as before. Margot found herself paying more attention to the history around her, noticing architectural details, asking elderly customers about their memories, thinking about what stories from the present should be preserved for the future. And she found herself thinking about succession. She was only 41, but Catherine Monroe had been 45 when she became sole keeper of the hours. It was never too early to think about who might come next. One afternoon in September, nearly a year after she'd first found Thomas's journal, Margot was training a new barista, a bright, curious university student named Michael, who asked thoughtful questions and noticed details. As she was showing him the espresso machine, he glanced at the brick wall behind the counter. "Is that brick original to the building?" he asked. "It is," Margot said. 1889. "Cool. I love old buildings. You can see the history in the bones, you know. The way things were made, the materials people used." He stepped closer, examining the bricks. "Hey, some of these have stamps on them. Look, this one's an hourglass." Margot smiled. He had the eyes of a keeper. "Let me tell you a story," she said. It was October again. 1 year and 1 week since Margot Chen had found Thomas Rothwell's journal tucked behind the window frame at the Hourglass Coffee Shop. The afternoon light slanted through the tall windows in the familiar way, gilding the dust motes, warming the old wooden tables. Margot stood behind the counter, the Chronicle open before her, preparing to write what might be her final entry as active keeper. The exhibition had been a success. The treasures were properly preserved and accessible, and she had trained Michael, her new assistant manager, in both the practical running of the coffee shop and the deeper history it held. She took up her pen and began to write. October 31st. 1 year since I found the foundation in the town hall basement. 1 year since this journey began in earnest. The treasures of the hours have been found, documented, and shared. The story has been told. The keepers have been honored, but the work continues, as it always does. Not the specific work of searching for hidden caches. That quest is complete. But the larger work of paying attention, of remembering, of preserving what matters. Today, I received a letter from Dr. Helena Martinez at the San Diego Natural History Museum. She's writing a book about David Rose and the garden's memory, exploring how Rose's botanical documentation is being used in contemporary conservation efforts. She asked if I would write a foreword about the hours and the context of Rose's work. I said yes. Professor Ainsworth tells me that the timekeeper has been accessed more than 5,000 times online since it was digitized. Genealogists are finding their families in his grandfather's careful records. People are connecting to their histories, understanding their roots. The map of stars is on permanent display at the Maria Mitchell Association, and I'm told it's one of their most popular exhibits. Girls stand in front of it and see a woman scientist's hand, see proof that women have always understood the stars. This is what the hours preserved. Not just objects, but connections. Not just information, but inspiration. I have been thinking about what Catherine Monroe wrote in 1940. The patterns persist. She was right. The pattern of people caring about memory, about truth, about preservation. That pattern moves through time, taking different forms, but remaining essentially the same. The hours may have ended as a formal society, but the impulse that created it persists. We are all keepers in our way. We all choose what to preserve, what to remember, what to pass on. I am grateful to have been part of this pattern. Grateful to Thomas Rothwell for his faith, to Catherine Monroe for her vision, to Alice Hartwell for her dedication. Grateful to Professor Ainsworth for his partnership, to Jamie and Michael, and all the volunteers who helped share this story. The Hourglass Coffee Shop continues, as it has for 135 years. The chronicle continues, and when I am gone, someone else will keep it, will guard it, will add their own entries to the record. The hours pass. The sand falls through the glass, but memory persists if we give it a vessel. Margot Chen, Keeper, October 31st. She closed the chronicle and sat for a moment in the quiet afternoon. Through the window, she could see the copper beech across the street, its leaves brilliant gold in the autumn sun. Students walked past with backpacks and coffee cups. Professor Ainsworth would arrive in 20 minutes for his afternoon coffee, as he did every Tuesday and Thursday now, sitting in what had once been Thomas's chair by the window. Life continued its patterns, and within those patterns, memory persisted. Michael emerged from the back room, carrying a fresh tray of scones. "These are ready for the display case," he said, then noticed the chronicle open on the counter. "Finishing an entry. Finishing this chapter," Margot said. "The next entries will belong to whoever comes after me." "That's a long time from now, I hope," Michael said with a smile. "I hope so too," Margot agreed. "But when the time comes, someone will be ready." The patterns persist. She wrapped the chronicle carefully in its cloth and placed it in the safe. Then she returned to the counter, wiped down the espresso machine, and prepared for the evening rush. The Hourglass Coffee Shop had stood for 135 years. It would stand for many more. And in its walls, in its foundations, in the spaces between stones, the story of the hours would wait, silent most of the time, but ready to be revealed again, whenever someone took the time to look, to ask, to remember. In the transom above the door, the hourglass design caught the late afternoon light, scattering fragments of color across the floor. Time measured, time preserved, time flowing in both directions. The patterns persist, the hours continue, and the work of remembering, of preserving, of honoring what matters, that work is never truly finished. It simply passes from keeper to keeper, generation to generation, hour to hour, like sand falling through glass. Margot looked at the familiar space around her, the tin ceiling, the brick walls, the worn floorboards, and smiled. There were no more hidden treasures to find, no more mysteries to solve. Just the daily work of keeping a place, serving coffee, listening to stories, paying attention to what matters. And sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything. The afternoon light deepened to gold, then amber, then the soft blue of evening. Customers came and went. Coffee was brewed and served. The espresso machine hissed and sang. Someone laughed at the corner table. Pages turned. A spoon clinked against a ceramic cup. The ordinary sounds of life continuing, of community gathering, of a space that had witnessed 135 years of human connection and would witness countless more. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The same stars Maria Mitchell had drawn 148 years ago. The same stars that would shine long after all the keepers and their treasures had faded to memory. But for now, for this evening, for this moment, there was light and warmth and the smell of coffee and a story that had been hidden and then found, and the quiet satisfaction of work completed and work continuing. Margot locked the door at 9 o'clock, switched off the lights one by one, and stepped out into the October night. Behind her, the Hourglass Coffee Shop stood solid and dark, keeping its secrets and its history, ready to begin again tomorrow. The hourglass in the transom glinted once in the streetlight, and then the night closed around it, gentle and complete. Sleep well, dear listener. The story is told, the treasures are found, and morning will come with new mysteries, new patterns to discover. But for now, rest. Let the rhythm of the hours lull you to sleep, time measured, time preserved, time flowing like sand through glass. Rest well. The patterns persist, and you are part of them. Good night.